Excuse me. May I have everybody's attention, please? Excuse me. Thank you. Hello, my name is Ken Ashford. I'm the Vice President of Black Student Union at Los Angeles Valley College. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome each and every one of you, and thank you for coming. We're going to start right away because we're a little bit behind time. Today we're going to have a lecture and debate between three fine gentlemen here. I'm sure you can find very interesting. The format is going to be, each gentleman is going to speak 40 minutes, and after all gentlemen have spoken, there'll be a question and answering period. I will be picking out the questions, okay? Who's going to ask the questions? We have a large group here, and so can you keep calm, keep it down on the talking. If any time you have to leave early, would you please leave quietly? Don't make a big commotion about it. That's all we're asking for you to do. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce these three gentlemen. Another thing, if you do start a commotion and if you do get pretty loud, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Thank you. To my left, to your right, is Rabbi Goldstein. He's a rabbi at Hillel. He's a director of Hillel right across the street. He's also an instructor at Los Angeles Valley College. Also, we have Professor Zev Garver. He's the Jewish Study Chairman at Los Angeles Valley College, and he's also a Jewish Study teacher. And this always gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Rashad Dean. He's a West Coast Regional Minister for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad of the National Islam. He's also Associate Professor of Pan-African Studies at Cal State Los Angeles. He has traveled extensively throughout Europe and Africa, 2 times lecturing at South Africa, special guest for 2 years of the Uganda President Idi Amin. He has traveled 2 times to Israel, 4 times to Egypt, and 3 times to Mecca. Would you please join me in introducing Dr. Rashad? Rabbi Goldstein, start first.
Good morning. I'm concerned about all of you who have to stand in the back. Would it be any easier to, I don't know, maybe to sit up front or something? Okay. I am genuinely pleased to be here today. I came in response to an invitation to participate in a commemoration of Martin Luther King's birthday. This day has become an ever increasingly important day to all Americans who are concerned with the principles of justice and democracy and fairness to all people who live in America. Martin Luther King was one of the great Americans whose birthday deserves national attention. It deserves to be regarded as a national holiday, and I'm one of those who would certainly promote its establishment as an official legal holiday. I think that recalling the message of his life and the burden of his death calls all of us to work ever harder for increased appreciation of one another, for the gifts we have, and for the opportunity to make this country what it is meant to be, a country of freedom and justice for all. I had the privilege of meeting Martin Luther King many years ago in 1965 when there was at that time, a major move to challenge the segregationist laws in St. Augustine, Florida. The Reverend King directed a telegram to a meeting of rabbis that I was attending. He asked that we might stand in solidarity with him and other good people in St. Augustine to challenge the widespread practice of segregation in that city. As a matter of fact, in all of the United States at that time. I went with a group of rabbis. There were 18 of us who went to St. Augustine, and I met with him there. I had a memorable evening in a church, at a fantastic evening. First time I met Jesse Jackson, and I met Andy Young, and I met Martin Luther King that night. I don't think at the point that I met them all, I realized precisely what I was doing when I met them all. I met also hundreds and hundreds of really super decent people who were committed to nonviolent challenge of a status quo situation which was truly intolerable. I participated that evening, I remember, in a scary walk through St. Augustine, Florida. It was a frightening moment for me to walk in a procession of about 100 people, including us 18 rabbis, right through the city of St. Augustine, and people were standing on the sidewalks on either sides of us holding bricks and broken bottles, hostile. I have seldom in my life felt more threatened to stand up for the principles in which I believed. The next morning I was arrested when I sought to go into a restaurant in St. Augustine in the company with a black friend who I had met. That was illegal in those days, to go together into the same restaurant. I was arrested and I was charged with a whole bunch of stuff. I was put into jail, and I know the inside of St. John's County Jail. They wouldn't let Martin Luther King and me be in the same cell. In those days, they insisted that black prisoners be in one cell and white prisoners be in another cell. We objected, we protested even that, to no avail. But all that's in the past. At least legally now, they can't do that anymore. Legally at this point, you and I can go into any restaurant we want to, anytime we want to, and if we get arrested for violating a law, we will go to the same jail and sit in the same cell. That's progress, and I applaud that. But most of all, I applaud the opportunities for growth in America, which make it possible for people like us to sit down and talk about issues calmly and patiently, with understanding and with tolerance and with patience for one another. We were asked today to talk about who and what is the chosen people. That's a theological category. It's the chosen people doctrine is an article in the belief system of the Jewish people. It's a doctrine of belief which is important for Jews to understand, and I think it's important for non-Jews to understand as well. Let me be very, very clear at the outset. When Jews assert that they are a chosen people, as indeed we do, that is never ever meant in any sense that we feel ourselves superior to anybody. There is no sense in the Jewish people's chosenness doctrine, any sense whatsoever that anybody else is inferior. For us, what it means to be a chosen people has always meant a sense of mission, a sense of responsibility. Let me share with you, just before I go any further, some of the words that you can find in the Jewish prayer book. I think that the whole direction of Jewish self-understanding has always meant that Jews, as a chosen people, must work to eliminate oppression in the world, must work to raise the standards of justice, must work to express compassion for all underprivileged, for all people who are in need of help, to be part of the priestly people, the Jewish people, means a Jew must be philanthropic, must be compassionate, must be bound by the yoke of Torah, as we say. This is the way one of the morning services that Jews have in the prayer book begins. Of course, a lot of our prayers use Hebrew, but let me share it with you in English. The service begins like this. And now, O Israel, what is it that the Lord your God demands of you? To revere the Lord our God, to walk always in his ways, to love and serve him with heart and soul. And now, therefore, if you will truly keep my covenant, you shall be to me a kingdom of priests, a holy people. To open blind eyes, to bring out of prison the captive, and from their dungeons those who sit in darkness. And that's what it's calling on. If you are going to be part of this kingdom of priests, this chosen people, then you are committed to bringing prisoners out of their captivity and from their dungeons, those who sit in darkness. And that's a metaphor. It stands for helping all those people whose capacity to enjoy life is in some way or other restricted. And one need not sit specifically in a prison cell to be restricted. One can, in fact, live on the streets of Van Nuys and be severely restricted in opportunities for growth, opportunities for movement, opportunities to provide for one's own family a minimum level of safety and security. That same morning service goes on to say, quoting a number of biblical verses, "We are Israel, witnesses to the covenant between God and his children. We are Israel. Our Torah forbids the worship of race or nation, possessions or power. We are Israel. Our prophets proclaimed an exalted vision for the world. We are Israel, schooled in the suffering of the oppressed. We are Israel, taught to beat swords into plowshares, commanded to pursue peace. We are Israel, O God, when we are witnesses to your will and messengers of your truth." Now, where does that vision of us as a chosen people come from? It comes out of an ancient past. We Jews are an old people. We trace our roots back 4,000 years. We trace our roots back to our father Abraham. Abraham was born and brought up in Mesopotamia in the Far East. It depends how you, in the eastern end of the Middle East, in what is today, I guess, Iraq, the land between the rivers. Abraham grew up like a nice Mesopotamian fellow in a pagan family. His father, according to legend, was an idol maker. Literally earned his living making these little statues that people, well-adjusted, normal, everyday people in that culture used to set up and worship as representations of God. Somehow or other, in his own intelligence and his own brilliance, in response to God's call, Abraham broke through into a new age of religious awareness. He comprehended that somehow or other these idols were really an improper way to represent God. That as a matter of fact, God was not many, but God was one. I think he had a dim awareness of it. I don't think that Abraham understood all that Judaism came to understand. He was a pioneer, a beginning pioneer, and he began to understand what it might be to respond to God and to do His will. To do His will with an understanding that God's will required moral commitments to justice and compassion. Abraham left the land of his birth. He left Mesopotamia, and he moved to what Jews came to call the Promised Land. He moved to the land of Israel, and he set up residence there. And he began, as he lived, he began to attract to him some relatives and others who could share in his vision of a people who were dedicated to the service of God. Abraham's son is known as Isaac. Isaac's son is known as Jacob. Those are the first three generations of Hebrews, the people who came from across the river, who settled in the land of Israel, and who began to develop this exalted vision of what life as a Jew might come to be. The story of the Jews, the early story of the Jews, the ancient story of the Jews, is preserved in the Holy Scriptures, in what Jews call the Tanakh, what Christians call the Old Testament. Those stories I don't take to be literal truths. I am not a fundamentalist. I don't see those as being scientific history. I see them as the legends of my people, the legends of the Jewish people. I see them, those stories, and all of that biblical record as being the way in which Jews came to remember their origins. And what marks that whole story is an ever-increasing breadth of vision, an ever-expanding notion of what it would mean to be a Jew. I think there are ups and downs in it. For instance, it's pretty clear that although my people 3,000 years ago, 3,200 years ago, were slaves in Egypt, I mean, it's awfully clear to me that the Jews who 4 generations after Abraham left the Promised Land and went to Egypt in a time of famine became imprisoned and became slaves. I have to tell that story because it's very important in Jewish self-consciousness, that our people really formed into a people during that time of slavery. For several hundred years we lived in Egypt and were slaves, building the monuments of Egyptian society, until Moses, one of the greatest of all the Jewish leaders ever, came along, and a fabulous personality, a genius, a spiritual genius, a giant among all human beings in the world, inspired by his dedication to God, knowing that it was terrible for any people to be oppressed, and certainly knowing that it was terrible for his own people to be oppressed, led them forth from their slavery in Egypt, led them through the wilderness in Sinai, led them to Mount Sinai, and presented them with a code for behavior. That code for behavior, which we're inclined to call the Torah, the teachings, is epitomized often as the 10 Commandments, but it's far more than that. It would be all right if people would follow those 10 Commandments. That might be a good start. But there's far more to Judaism and far more to following after God than just keeping the 10 Commandments. But Moses formed up this Jewish people not as a band of ex-slaves, but as a band of people who would be dedicated to serving God. Serving God through certain customs and ceremonies, to be sure, but serving God in such a way that the world might be a better place for our being here. Now, I said a moment ago that I think that not everything that exists in the Torah represents the highest level of moral awareness. I believe as a modern Jew that there is continual revelation, there's continual understanding of what it is that God wants of us. Let me give you a dramatic example. It's clear in reading the Bible that my ancestors, although they were themselves former slaves, would tolerate slavery in their own midst. There is no doubt that my ancestors, 1,000 years ago, more than that, 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, did keep slaves. There were regulations that the Jews came to place on slavery. That's how human awareness grows. And I find it sort of bewildering looking back that my people in ancient times, having been slaves and knowing the cruelty of slavery, didn't flat out say there shall be no more slavery. But their minds hadn't grown yet to that level. Their responsiveness to being a kingdom of priests hadn't yet risen to that level of moral awareness. What they did do is to say, no one may be a slave for more than 7 years. That a slave should be given the opportunity to go free. That if a slave doesn't have the good sense to go free when given an opportunity to go free at the end of 7 years, that slave should have his ear pounded in a special kind of ceremony. As if somehow or other you should knock awareness into his head. He ought to hear what it means to go free. We have repudiated slavery, and there is that growth in Judaism where the meaning of slavery in our own time expands far beyond the mere possession of a human being. To enslave people at this time and in this age, I would see as in any way restricting their ability to live out their life as fully as possible, as fully as God would have them live it out, to realize as much of their potential as possible. I would say at this stage of the game that we enslave people when we deny them self-respect, when we deny them the ability to respect themselves as one of God's children. And my Judaism teaches me that every human being is one of God's children. Every single human being, in every part of planet Earth, is one of God's children. And God prefers no group of children over any other group of children. It is one of the sins of human beings that we enslave one another, that we restrict one another, that we raise ourselves up by pushing somebody else down. That is, in a modern perception of Judaism, a kind of slavery, and surely a form of sin. The Jews clearly connect the notion of being chosen to the notion of having a mission. To be a Jew is, in the modern world, to choose to be part of this kingdom of priests who are dedicated with all the energy and vigor of their spiritual selves to improve the quality of life in this world for all people. Now, that's not an easy task. And I'm the first one to admit that I don't always hold up to it. I get tired. I get weary. I get scared. It's not easy to really work at trying to improve the quality of life for all human beings. I wear out. But that doesn't excuse me. I, every year, go through a ceremony in Judaism known as Yom Kippur. That's our Day of Atonement. It is the most holy, sacred day of the Jewish year. It comes 10 days after Rosh Hashanah, the new year. It is a day in which I am called, along with every other Jew, to examine the quality of my life, to see where I ran out of energy in this last year, to see where I ran out of courage, to see where I ran out of strength to do what I'm supposed to do as a believing Jew, as a member of this chosen people. Yom Kippur comes every day as a heavy day of religious experience. In the Jewish calendar, there is no day of heavier Jewish religious experience. It's a fast day. We Jews neither eat nor drink for 24 hours, from sundown to sundown. We commit all our energies on that day to an examination of how we've been living our life, how well we have been fulfilling the responsibilities of Judaism to carry out a message of justice and compassion and forgiveness to all the people among whom we live. And if we have not measured up to what we should have been, and I think that's always the case, then we have to seek for teshuvah. We have to seek for repentance. We have to seek to confront ourselves, to pray to God for energy and strength, and resolve with every ounce of our own sincerity to do better than we have done in the year that's just concluded. I was taught when I was growing up, as a young Jew, not to regard myself so much as a part of the chosen people, but rather to be part of a choosing people. That put the responsibility on me rather than on my father or grandfather. I was born into a Jewish family, but it's for me to choose to embrace Judaism. There's a cute little ditty I remember learning when I was 17. I don't know who wrote it. How odd of God to choose the Jews. It's not so odd. The Jews chose God. Now that's really where it gets to be. We individual Jews, if we want to be true to this heritage that goes all the way back to our father Abraham, 4,000 years ago, must do what he did. He chose to follow God. He chose to uproot himself from the normalities of Mesopotamia, from being an average Joe in the land between the rivers. He chose to energize himself with a spiritual commitment and to dedicate his life to improving the quality of life in the world. That's the heritage that comes down to me as one of the children of Israel. To dedicate my energies to improving the quality of life. Helping people talk to each other. Helping people to listen to each other. Helping people understand one another. Helping people to learn to live with differences. Because I know it is not possible for all human beings to be exactly the same. I know, though, that it is certainly possible for human beings who have got their own act together to understand and appreciate other people who are in a different place. The key to peace in this world, and I desperately seek peace in this world, is not that we should all come out looking the same, or saying the same thing, or believing the same thing. The key to peace in this world lies in understanding one another and appreciating each one of us as the unique beings we are. I see this discussion today not so much as a debate, because I don't want to debate today, but really as an opportunity to promote peace in the world, understanding between us, to appreciate the kind of commitments that I have and that each of you has. I see this as an opportunity even to agree to disagree agreeably. Because surely we will disagree on things, but this much we should agree on, that we can disagree agreeably. We can appreciate one another and understand one another, honor one another, and help one another. Thank you.
Excuse me. Hey, can we have your attention, please, again? The rules apply, so this would be last week. If you get out of hand, I'm going to ask you to leave. Okay, it gives me great pleasure again to introduce Mr. Zeb Garber.
One of the advantages of following another speaker who presents his opinion about a certain religious tradition is that I do not have to retrace some of the concepts that were presented in the name of Judaism, and consequently would have the freedom, as it were, to develop other notions which might not have been able to have been developed effectively in the course of a general presentation regarding the topic Judaism, as Jews understand that religion to be a chosen people. Let me begin with a certain apology and also a very important position that I must take. What you're going to hear for the next 40 minutes is one man's opinion about Judaism. What you're going to hear is one man's understanding of a religious heritage that flows in my very veins and in my very bones that goes back metaphorically 4,000 years. What you're going to hear in the next 40 minutes is only one person's understanding of a religious heritage to which he was born into, and also a religious civilization which this individual, namely myself, has chosen to have as my lifestyle until the day I leave this world. What you're going to hear is going to be a little disturbing to some, and what you're going to hear articulates might not be what you want to hear as representative of Judaism. I can only say in my opening remarks that this is my own opinion, these are my own feelings, and from that point of view, I would expect that you would respect what I have to say, for it's one man's viewpoints, one man's thinking process that's going forth. Rabbi Jerry Goldstein made reference to a significant holiday of the Jewish year referred to as Yom Kippur. He also made reference to a concept referred to as Teshuvah. The concept of Yom Kippur, also referred to in the Bible of the Jewish people, known as the Tanakh, what others call the Old Testament, is the Sabbath of Sabbaths. The Yom Kippur day, if a Jew doesn't do anything religiously in the course of the Jewish year, he probably does something significant on this day. For most Jews, it is a fast. For others, it is meditation. Still for others, it is contact with fellow Jews and debating, as it were, before man, before universe, before nature, and also before gods. On this day of Yom Kippur, Jews are committed to various principles, one of which Rabbi Jerry Goldstein alluded to, the principle of Teshuvah, which often is translated in English as repentance, but I choose to translate it as returning. Returning back to one's God, returning back to one's tradition, returning back to one's heritage, returning back to oneself and back to one's head and getting it straight there as well. And also when all that returning takes place, to go forth and to do what Jerry calls a mission. Somehow Yom Kippur doesn't come to an end when the Jew gets his act together with himself, with his people, with his gods. Because in the late afternoon hours of Yom Kippur, as that 24-hour fast comes to an end, the Jews in Los Angeles and the Jews in Washington, the Jews in the Soviet Union, the Jews of Syria, if there are Jews that are able to still pray there freely, the Jews of Mecca, if there are Jews still there, the Jews of Egypt and the Jews of the state of Israel. Wherever you find the Jew, there is the obligation of the Jewish people, whatever languages they speak, whatever skin they endow their own personality, to read a message of a book called the Book of Jonah. The Book of Jonah, one of the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible, is a very strange message. It tells the story of a certain Jew by Jonah, his name, to go to a people referred to as the Assyrians. The Assyrians were a classic people of the ancient Near East, and among their accomplishments, they were able to stomp out and step upon, to use the terminology which I feel comfortable with today, to snuff out different civilizations and different peoples. The Assyrians were also the great destroyers of my people's ancient past. If there is a small Jewish people today, it is because Jews in the course of history, and Jews, wherever geographical space they were able to inhabit, were exposed to and thus victimized by crusades, inquisitions, exterminations, and in our own recent memory, the greatest destruction ever inflicted upon any people, the Holocaust. And between 1933 and 1945, the slaughter of 1/3 of my people, called the Jews, as the world participated either actively or not actively, and thus were complacent to the greatest murder ever recorded in recorded history. The Assyrians destroyed 10 of the 12 tribes of ancient Israel. If there are Jews today, it is because one or two of these tribes were able to manage and able to survive. But the Assyrians were the great Nazis of their day, and they destroyed 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel. And consequently, on this particular day of Yom Kippur, the Jew reads a book. It's a book which is very simple. It's a book which consists only of 4 chapters. It is a book of a Jew who's told to go to Assyria and to preach this very term that Jerry introduced, namely teshuvah. The Jew Jonah said, "Hell no, you go if you want," referring to the deity. "I'm not going to go to Assyria." The Assyria that we're talking about is not simply a Gentile nation, nor is it a neighborly nation, nor is it an indifferent nation. It was a nation that destroyed, literally uprooted and destroyed men, women, and children, and destroyed 10 of the 12 tribes of ancient Israel. So Jonah's request of not going, I can identify with. Yet God does a number on Jonah, according to the writer of the book of Jonah. And Jonah eventually, in a sense, is forced to go because he refuses to go on his own free will, and basically goes to Assyria and preaches what? Repentance. At the end of this four-chapter book, we're told how Jonah sits on the hillsides to see if really these Assyrians, the great destroyers of the Jews, if you will, are going to follow the way of ethic, are going to follow righteousness and truth, are going to live once again as decent human beings with others, irrespective of where others are coming from. And Jonah consequently sits from a hillside and sees what happens in Assyria. We're then told a very strange story of how Jonah, sitting under that sun, is basically physically suffering from the heat of the day. Overnight, a plant is created which protects Jonah from the heat. Jonah is relieved as a result of that plant, created overnight by the power, if you will, of God. And then all of a sudden, as the story would have it, a plant is destroyed. A worm comes and snips at the buds of this particular plant, and the plant falls aside. Jonah now is fit to be tied. Number one, he doesn't like the mission to the great destroyers of his people. Number two, he doesn't like the fact that a simple plant of nature, a simple, innocent, inanimate thing gets destroyed just like that because there's a powerful God that snaps his finger and destroys the plants. "Are you angry?" says God to Jonah. "You better believe I am," as I paraphrase the dialogue. "Why are you angry, Jonah?" "Well, what the hell did the plant do, God, that you just snapped it like that?" And consequently, the great answer of God at the end of this book, according to the writer of the book of Jonah, "You are angry for this particular plant which you did not plant, and you did not water, and you did not flourish, and rightly so would be the inclination. And consequently, should I not also be concerned with others, namely human beings who don't know their left from their rights, suggesting what? Innocent generations who happen to call themselves Assyrians." That book of Jonah is a very agonizing book. I sit in synagogue, or what Jews refer to as shul, and I try to listen to that book. I try to understand that one of my missions, indeed the ultimate mission of what the hell it is to be a Jew, is that when it's all said and done, and when Jews talk to Jews, they've got to go to blacks, and they've got to go to black Muslims, and they've got to go to Christians, they've got to go to Hindus, they've got to go to others, and somehow extend that hand and say, brother, together we'll establish a better day. I'm not going to be dishonest before you. It is hard for me as a Jew after Auschwitz. It is hard for me as a Jew after the state of Israel is established, in which most of the world cannot recognize the state of Israel as a Jewish state, and which most of the world is willing to extend a hand to me because I'm a fellow human being, but will refuse to extend that hand because I identify myself as a Jew. I don't want recognition as a human being. That's my birthright. What I want is recognition as a Jew. And if it disturbs the other, it's their problem. It isn't going to be my problem. Hence the agonizing responsibility of hearing this book of Jonah. When I'm told by my tradition, when I'm told by my gods, when I'm told by everything that is holy, that for me to fulfill my Jewish obligation, I've got to go to the destroyer, I've got to go to Assyria, and somehow make the enemy a friend. I also have to go to Egypt because we have another classic story on Passover nights in which we tell the story of the Egyptian slavery, and that somehow when that fifth cup is drunk, the cup of Elijah, the symbolism, the paradigm of that future messianic age, that the Jew must learn the message of slavery and somehow not abhor the individual Egyptians, but rather abhor slavery that Jerry alluded to as well. And that when the Jew is able to shake hands with the enslaver, namely Egypt, when the Jew is able to shake hands with the destroyer, namely Assyria, then you can talk realistically and rationally, logically, mystically, emotionally, and spiritually of a better age, of an age of the independence of mankind. The agony is incredible, obviously. It is hard to talk to others when others cannot talk to you as you want to present yourself, as it were. Jerry talks about Yom Kippur to be the day during the year. Let me perhaps add something to that. Yom Kippur is the Teshuvah for the nation of Israel as a nation. The Teshuvah is a principle that the observant in the traditional and reform and liberal, whatever Jew you want to talk about, is obligated to do every day of the year, not just simply one day and then forget about it until the next Yom Kippur. God's first question to mankind, and all of us, and you should understand this, particularly those of you who are not Jewish in this audience, Jews are not homogenous, they're not robots. Jews don't just talk one way and that's the end of it. It looks like that, doesn't it, when you're not part of the same group? Just as I suspect Jews looking upon others think the others are basically the same thing, that they don't have the ability to criticize or to reflect and to offer individual opinions. Let me tell you something about Jews. Jews are incredibly independent. They are incredibly extreme in everything that they take. But before the outside world, they have an ability, over 4,000 years they've done this, to present a unification, a concept called Am Yisrael, the nation of Israel. One of the concepts that the nation of Israel takes seriously, which I individually likewise take, which will give you some kind of experiential, vicarious association of what I mean by teshuvah of every day, is God's first question as recorded in the Bible. Some Jews take it literally, still others take it as an allegory, still others take it as a metaphor. I, Zev Garber, take it as a serious question, as if I were the Adam of the story referred to. After there is the awareness of knowledge, read now as you demythologize this tree of knowledge story. After man has taken knowledge and abused knowledge and destroyed all that surrounds. The President of the United States, for the next couple of days before he gives up his office, made reference in his remarks to the nation yesterday. One of the 4 points he referred to was that total nuclear warfare. One of the things that impressed me about that script that Carter read before the nation was that if there ever is another war, read it, World War III, every second, mind you, would be equivalent to all the bombs that went off totally during World War II. There's no one in this room here that's going to survive it, period. I don't care what belief system you have, what system that you have to exist in this world. You ain't going to exist when the bombs fall in a nuclear warfare. Knowledge of nuclear physics is very good. Man can use that type of knowledge, and man can alleviate and wipe out, etc., the evils that confront us all. Now try to understand where I'm coming from. When I hear a speech such as Jimmy Carter's speech last night, when I try to reflect upon it, when I come to these things from my Jewish heritage, as it were, I try to relate it to a basic premise that is part and parcel of the Jewish continuous story that goes back 4,000 years. I reflect upon the question of knowledge. I reflect upon the biblical way of how man has abused knowledge. And God's first question to mankind, Ayeka Adam. Where are you, Adam? No, don't read simply Adam, have knowledge of Hebrew. Where are you, man? Where are you, mankind? That question is asked in the singular, and it speaks to me as it speaks to each one of you right at this moment. After all is said and done with all the collective knowledge you have going for you, after all the billions of years that you have lived as human race on this earth, what have you done with all that knowledge? What have you done in ripping off others, and what have you done in wars that you participated in, and what have you done in destroying this earth that is part and parcel of all of us, to live on it, not as masters, but partners with others and with nature as well? That to me is that Ayeka trip, that Teshuvah trip, which I ask myself after I go through a daily ritual of prayers. I look at myself face to face and I say, Ayeka, where are you going, Zev Garber? What kind of life are you going to live? What kind of day is this day going to be? What kind of interaction are you going to have at a debate that starts at 11 o'clock? How are you going to respond to others? Are you going to say things which you're then going to somehow have a reservation about after? Are you going to calm yourself in the heat of an argument and sentiments of this nature? If you're with me so far, people, then you can understand that the term chosen people and chosen individual is not, as some people like to see it, quote, a racial term, quote, a superior term, quote, all kinds of theological gymnastics. Because if the truth really be made known, can God, who is worshipped as the one God by Muslims and Christians and Jews, can he really be different? The fact of the matter is, those who are believers in all these three revealed religions would affirm the same oneness of God in their basic traditions. Maybe it's a little different how we respond to this God. Maybe it's a little different how we understand his workable nature. but still it is the same God's. And if God chooses one, he chooses the other, and if God chooses the other, he chooses the one. I personally feel the history of the Jewish people, and let this be known as factual, and it's not myth. The Jews are mankind's longest surviving people with a continuous history. There's no other people in this world who has a continuous memory as the Jewish people has. And maybe for that reason, if the world no longer has a Jew, the world would be dwarfed in absence of the presence of a consciousness called the Jews. It doesn't mean that the Jews are superior, and it doesn't mean that the Jews are inferior. It simply means that the Jews have something about themselves which they take self-pride in, and that something, if you will, has been contributed to mankind. What does it say to me, this chosen people business? It says, hey, I'm important. It says, hey, I've got pride. It says, hey, I've got a heritage. It says, I am meaningful. I'm not just another number, another face in the crowds. If the other cannot respond to it, that is his problem or her problem. It ought not be my problem. On the blackboards, I put several terms: the self and the other, the I and the id. I am the self, if you will, because I'm talking from my vantage points. When I respond to the other, I do not take the principle as is found by some people. When you respond to the other is inferior. Or from other points of view, when you respond to the other is superior. If you respond to another, and I talk now as an individual, but you can easily make it also in regard to a group. If you respond to the other as being something inferior, then you're talking about an egotistical type of lifestyle. You're talking about Nazis, who are probably the extreme example of seeing themselves as a superior self and all others are inferior, to the point that you waste them after you make them slaves, and then you throw them into ovens and they become ashes, or as my people developed into, lampshades and bars of soap. Or you can take a position that often is found among certain celibate communities, such as certain classical or medieval monks in Christianity, which basically sees its role not to be at all equal to the other, but sees its role to be inferior to the other, and consequently serves mankind to the point of robbing oneself of his own identity. Such a lifestyle where you die for others, such a lifestyle where you work for others, where your own individual value is not really put up front. You refer to that in ethical discussions as an altruistic lifestyle. I am saying that Judaism, and I personally, do not affirm an egotistical lifestyle nor an altruistic lifestyle. I don't see myself being better than the other, nor do I see myself in the same breath how others have treated me, read my people, in the course of history, as being some kind of inferior piece of garbage that you just throw into a garbage pan and the world stands by. I'm talking from my sense of value. I am neither superior nor inferior. I am equal to. That position, baby, is referred to as love your neighbor as yourself. It's a basic principle found in the Hebrew Bible. If it's come into other cultures, it is because the Jews taught mankind that principle found in the book of Leviticus of the Hebrew book called the Torah. Love your neighbor as yourself doesn't mean more than yourself, read the altruistic lifestyle, nor does it mean less than yourself. The Hebrew terminology, and you have to learn it from the Hebrew, not from any translations, or any paraphrases, or any interpretations, is v'achafta l'reacha kamocha. You're to love your neighbor as yourself. I want my neighbor to accept me as I accept him. But then, as some of you are juggling your heads, realize, what if the system doesn't work? So if, Garber, you're giving us a nice academic, shebang. What happens when you walk outside that door and your neighbor doesn't respond when you extend the hands? Or your neighbor doesn't say hello when you say, how are you doing? How do you respond this way? What you're basically referring to, consequently, is the distortion of the I and thou, and basically creating an I and id type of situation. The ideal would be, and the Jew should be committed to this, is responding to another as an equal, not inferior, not superior. But oftentimes, tragically, as was alluded to by the first speaker, oftentimes the relationship breaks down to the I and ids. Oftentimes you basically get involved with someone or some organization or some kind of principle by saying, what the hell am I going to get out of it, and damn the rest and damn the all. The minute you put yourself central fold and don't give a damn about anyone else, and America's society is going this way, I'm not quite sure it's going to survive to the 21st century. The minute you have that narcissistic, everything is going to be for me, this me mentality, then you have a distortion of the I and thou, and you have what we refer to as the I and its. The I and its is how human beings normally act. It doesn't mean because the majority culture acts this way that you got to follow that trend. Jews have an interesting track record, and they've always been counterculture, and I think that's good about Jews. Jews are not segregationists. They segregate among themselves because they have to survive. They segregate among themselves because, tragically, historically speaking, the Jews have been smashed to pieces. Before you can collectively speak to others, you've got to regain your own self-value, your own self-worth. And then you have that commitment of go to Assyria and relate to others. Now, when the others are basically going to relate to you and they don't like you, follow me now, and they want to destroy you, if Judaism, and if Zeb Garber's interpretation of this culture is accurate, if Judaism maintains an altruistic position, then when the enemy comes with the sword or with the gun or with the bombs, then I just simply stay right there, piously accept the fates and be destroyed. That is not the Jewish ethic. In a similar token, if Judaism maintained the egotistical ethic, it basically would say, rip off the other person because you'll get something out of it. That likewise is not the ethic. Let me perhaps illustrate what I'm trying to say by citing several examples 2,000 years ago of the rabbis, the great sages who contributed so much to what is the contemporary civilization called the Jews. One story talks about two men walking in the wilderness and a canteen of water between them. The question is, who's going to survive? There's only one canteen of water to make it from here to there. If both share the water, both are going to die. That is the given equation. If one drinks of the water and doesn't share the water, that person is going to survive. The question is, who is to drink the water? One rabbi says, share the water so that one friend does not see the other die before his eyes. His answer, in a sense, is romantic, emotional, it is sentimental. But the bottom line, people, is if they share the water, 2 deaths at the end. The other rabbi, the famous revolutionary Rabbi Akiba, the one most responsible for that which is referred to as rabbinic Mishnah, this Rabbi Akiba spoke for the Jews, as it were, and speaks for Judaism, when he says, without any bashfulness on his parts, you don't share the water, you drink the water so that one can survive. When Rabbi Akiba is asked who drinks the water, he says the one who possesses the canteen. The one who possesses the canteen of water drinks the water. He doesn't share it with a neighbor. He doesn't share it with the friends. Cold! You better believe it, baby. It sounds that way, doesn't it? Romantic? Possibly so. Judging from some of your reactions, it is disturbing to you. You want a Jew to give you a Jewish interpretation, so bear me out. The one who possesses that water, he drinks of the water. When Akiba is asked the question, obviously you take your story, now you begin to discuss it. Why the possessor of the water? Why not the sharing of the water? Akiba gives a very pragmatic answer. You share the water, 2 people are dead at the end. Admittedly, if you divide the water, 2 are going to die. But if one doesn't divide the water, 1 is going to survive. When Akiba is then asked the other penetrating question, why the possessor of the water drinks of it? His response is, how are you to determine who is more valuable, the possessor of the water or the other? Consequently, for him, your life, your skin is significant as the other. So why should you take that subjective, altruistic position of sacrificing yourself for the other? Let's shift gears now, and you'll see where I'm coming from. The story is told later in the Talmud of a certain rabbi who was advised to give comment to the following problem. The government tells the Jews to kill another. A is told to kill B, and if he sheds the blood of B, A would be able to survive. Under a circumstance like that, the rabbi responds and says, I will not kill the other. My own life will be taken instead. When you're asked to kill the other, you have no right to say that you're more significant than the other. If you do that, then it is what? Egotistical. Consequently, murder would be wrong. Killing would be correct. Under the conditions, if killing means the enemy comes to destroy you, you have a right to self-defense, a right to have possession of life. Some of you are Gentiles. By this I mean you come from a non-Jewish background. And this type of rhetoric sounds too militant, maybe, sounds too weird, too off the board. You don't know Jews who talk this way. Jews do talk this way, and the tragedy is that Jews ought to impress their messages upon others. Because if you want a track record that's able to survive, it is this type of Jewish mentality. It doesn't mean that the Jew is superior, nor does it mean that the Jew is inferior. All he's saying by all this rhetoric is, I am just as important as you. And by saying that, he helps himself and has the obligation to help the other. Now you talk about chosen people, let me share you an in-talk with Jews. Because I think part of this business here is being too polite. Some of you are anxious to hear, well, what do Jews say to Jews? How do they rap one to another? Let me tell you something, that what you see in front of you is just one individual opinion. Not all Jews are like this. If you take the 6 million supposed Jews in America, 5 out of 6 Jews won't even walk into a dialogue of this nature. In fact, they won't even be identified with Jewish circles or Jewish groups. They will be totally what Jews call assimilated, part of that majority culture, part of that meanness, part of that business that says, I don't want to get involved. And if I do get involved, what am I going to get out of it? Hence the tragedy of the Jewish experience, oddly enough and strangely enough, is not how the others have treated the Jew, but rather the ignorance, the indifference of Jews and how they relate to their own particular traditions. If Jews are going to survive in the 21st century, it's going to have to be out of a commitment of self-awareness, of culture, of history, of the total civilization of the Jew. It is the question of worthwhileness of why be a Jew that is going to be the basic threat to Jewish survival. Not the anti-Semites, and you can take my words as embellishment or you can take me as seriously as I'm trying to offer them to you. Jews have survived against the anti-Semites in whatever color, whatever shape, whatever form, whatever ideology, whatever church, whatever symbol they lived under. Jews are around today. Most of their classical haters are dead and buried, just footnotes in history. Jews have mastered survival. What the thing has to be talked about is, can Jews master the worthwhileness of being a Jew? And if Jews come up with a negative no, then they are doing something, which I suspect the next speaker is going to agree to, and that is a self-abortion and suicide. If there's troubles in the Jewish camp today, it is because of the inability to come to grips with this responsibility and come to grips with it from the very foundations of what it is to be a Jew. Let me perhaps summarize my last statement with a term, 2 terms if you don't mind. Moses was referred to, Jacob was referred to, these 2 personalities of the Jewish minds. Jacob fighting with a man of God. Jacob always with the curse. Curse of being a second-born, curse Epis of not getting his father's blessings. For those who don't know the term Epis, you'll take Jewish studies classes, you'll pick up some of the in-talks. Epis is one of these filling terms. Jacob fights. Jacob has his curses. From the birth until the end, every significant episode about the patriarch Jacob is introduced by a curse. Jacob masters the curse, converts it into a blessing. Try to follow me right now. The paragon of Jacob is very, very important for me. It's very important for Jews. They call themselves after Jacob. They call themselves Israel. Jacob is first Israel. When his name is changed, your name will no longer be Jacob. It will be called Israel. When Jacob, called Israel, occurs, you have to understand what happens. I'm not going to be scientific because I can't be scientific. But at the same time, however non-rational I might sound to all of you, Zev Garber is not anti-rational. I am giving you vibes and you're feeling some energy. And you'll walk out of here either pleased or displeased. But your classic definition of the Jew is going to be a little altered as a result of what I'm going to say. I don't like curses. I wish the patriarch Jacob had complete blessings, but it wasn't beschriven, it wasn't decreed that way. I am fortunate that Jacob, fighting with those curses, was able to stop the curse, stop it, and get something of value from the curse, hence the curse blessing theme. When Jacob fights with a man of God, and Jacob is wounded, and the man of God cannot run away, the man of God is asked of Jacob, according to this account found in Genesis, what is your name, Jacob? Jacob gives his name, to which we then find in Genesis chapter 32 the phrase, your name, Jacob, shall no longer be called Jacob. It shall be called Israel. Ki sarita im Elohim v'im Adam v'tucha. You have fought with man. You have fought with God, and you have prevailed. Ever since that moment of history, whether it's myth, legend, makes no difference to me. Down to this very moment, you want to know the Jew's self-understanding of himself. It is fighting continuously with man and saying, I can't prevail. It's fighting against ghettos, inquisitions, crusades, bad press, and everything else, including Holocaust, Hitler, swastikas, anti-Semitism, which downed this community only last week. And not being demoralized, dehumanized by that experience, and saying, hey man, I'm going to prevail. Something else about the Jew, which other religions don't have going for them. Each religion has its own chosen aspiration, but this is Judaism's understanding of itself. Whereas Christianity sees the high point of agony to be the suffering experience of Christ on the cross to gain immortality. Whereas the Hindus talk about this world to be a passing phrase, including time and space, the object is what? That nirvana, all the way out there beyond our conception. And I suspect where the Buddhists basically tell us you want joy, avoid all kinds of desires. Because when you want something, there's the frustration, there's the pain. Hence the smile on the Buddhist face is because of his teaching. Avoid all wants, and you're in nirvana. There's an expert in Islam here, and I suspect he can correct the image I'm about to share with you about Islam. What is the ideal of Islam? It is obedience. What is the ideal of Islam? It is a belief that God is powerfully good, that God is all good, and all that happens is all good. The word Islam is an obedient, pious person to the ways of Allah and to his Prophet Muhammad and to the teachings ever since then down to this day. Judaism does not affirm that about God. Judaism does not have this type of fidelity. Sometimes I wish it does, about its creator and about its maker and about the reference of the God of Israel. Jews cannot have that opinion, cannot have that position in my opinion, because of the historical awareness of Jews that the all-powerful God and the God of promises can oftentimes be embarrassed by questions of how is it that the innocent seem to suffer, and how is it that Holocaust seems to occur to every little Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob being destroyed the way they were. Because to take that position from a Jewish point of view would imply that God and the devil, as it were, Hitler and others, are handshakes together, are partners in the destruction of innocence. Hence, I feel comfortable with that teaching of Judaism, which is the very root of what we're talking about, that says you're not an amen sayer of God's, that says that God creates the imperfect world and it's man's job to make it perfect, which says that man and God are partners. God did his job, man, you now do your job. That says that God creates and man redeems, that de-emphasizes the creed and plays up the deeds, that that's the bottom line. You fight with gods. You hear the phrase Israel, fighting with man and also constantly fighting with gods. And because you know that you're valuable, in the end, you prevail. You want to know something, people? That's what God wants. And when you don't fight with gods, then you ain't doing your Jewish thing. Am Yisrael. If there's one phrase you'll learn from my rhetoric, it's this phrase. The nation Israel. All Jews what you want. Kikes, Makis, Jews. They've been known by all kinds of names. The one name that people, so to speak, aren't aware of, that is pristine, that is original, is this phrase transliterated into English as Am Yisrael. You are a nation, Israel. You're a people. You are the people that fights with man and fights with God. The word Am, dear people, if I write it in Hebrew, also spells out the Hebrew phrase together and with, togetherness. What is a Jew? It is the sum total of religion, culture, spiritual, physical, national, ethnic, everything. Togetherness makes Israel. And it's that unity of diversity, which is what I understand to be the chosen concept, and why Jews have the track record that they do. Jews are mankind's eternal people.
Just one point from my point of view, I would like to say, I hope people don't get the impression that this is a fight or this is a learning institution here, and we're here to learn from each speaker. So I hope you don't get the impression that this person's right, this person's wrong. So we're just all here to learn. So that's why I just want to make the point. For the people who came in late, I'd like to introduce our next speaker again. He's the West Coast Regional Minister for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad of the National Islams. Thank you. He's Associate Professor of Pan-African Studies at Cal State Los Angeles. He has traveled extensively throughout Europe, Asia, and Africa. 2 times lecturing in South Africa, special guest for 2 years for Uganda President Idi Amin. 2 times traveled to Israel, 4 times to Egypt, and 3 times to Mecca. Would you come welcome Dr. Rashad
Brother Ken Ashford, Sister Cherie X, brothers and sisters of the Black Student Union, members of the Jewish community, brothers and sisters, Rabbi Jerry Goldstein, Professor Zeb Garber. This is a very important topic that has been chosen for us. We are taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that we should begin everything in the name of God. So in the name of Allah, who came in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, to whom praise is due forever. And we forever thank Allah for raising in our midst the black man and black woman of America, a divine leader, a divine teacher, and surely a divine guide in the person of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. And we thank Allah and his messenger for preparing a champion for the black man and black woman's cause, the most dynamic and charismatic, and certainly the guide of our day, made that way by God and his messenger, Minister Louis Farrakhan. In their names I greet you with the greeting words of peace. Assalamu alaikum. And to others, shalom alaikum. The topic is the chosen people. What a topic. Before we can go into the chosen people, we have to ask, who's doing the choosing? Because, as Professor Garber has said, he spoke from his own individual point of view. There would be others, if we had everyone to speak, who would speak from their own individual point of view. Everybody would, as the old folks say among black people, everybody would pick and choose. Now what we want to know is, who's doing the choosing? What are they choosing for? And we've got to look at the old scripture that says, as it was in the beginning, so shall it be in the ending. Now, what beginning? Whose beginning? The beginning of what? So it is proper for us to begin at the beginning. Judaism would not exist if Africa did not exist. Islam would not exist if Africa did not exist. Christianity would not exist if Africa did not exist. And the white man and white woman, himself and herself, and I certainly mean no disrespect, but you were warned that you must honor your mother and your father, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God. The white man and the white woman, be they Jew or Gentile, and let's get that mess straight before we even get started. Every Caucasian, every white man and woman who is not a Jew is a Gentile. Now let's take a look at it. When we study what is called etymology, the origin, the beginning, or the root of terms and terminology, isn't it interesting that the root the base or the root, the prefix of the term Gentile is the same as the prefix, the base or the root of the term general. All white folks who do not ascribe and believe to the tenets of Judaism are considered white folks in general. They're considered Gentiles. I mean, there's no question about it. Now, let us proceed. Since we've got that out of the way and got that straight, we don't have to, especially except for specific purposes during these few moments, separate the Jew from other white folks. All white folks are white folks. But for specific purposes and to adhere to the debate topic, we will have to make a distinction because the Jews have indeed caught hell all over the world. That people that are called Jews today. Let me put that on the board. If it's not insulting to anyone, and even if it is, I have to say so-called Jew. And then I'm going to go after this thing. So-called Jew. You see, the Jew is indeed an ancient people.
That's right.
The Jew is indeed an original people. But the question is, are you the real Jew? The question is, those of you of light pigmentation and white pigmentation, are you that original Jew from Abraham and from Moses? That's the question. That's the question that we hope to answer today. Because when you hide behind the term Jew, you are hiding behind something that the cover has to be pulled off of today. Now, the Jew has caught hell, the so-called Jew, the white Jew, has caught hell all over the planet Earth. No one can deny that. But now the question is, why has the white Jew caught hell?
Good question.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, under the searchlight of truth, shows us why the white Jew has caught hell. He teaches us that the white Jew has caught hell because you represent that group or that circle of people who adhered to the laws and the teachings and the customs that Moses brought to you. That Moses actually gave you a sense of civilization. Moses actually gave to you a sense of culture. And Moses actually gave to you an edge on the rest of the Gentiles. Your adherence to what Moses taught you put you out front. And when you're out front and the spotlight is on you, you meet with the anger, the resentment, the jealousy, and the scorn of your other white sister and brother.
Right.
Who is this chosen people? What beginning can we ascribe to them? The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that the white man and white woman are biologically and genetically a grafted mutant people who come up out of the original black man and black woman. It is biologically and genetically impossible for the recessive white man and recessive white woman, Muhammad teaches us, to produce the dominant yellow baby. It is biologically and genetically impossible for the recessive yellow man and yellow woman to produce the dominant brown baby. It is biologically and genetically impossible for the recessive brown man and woman to produce the dominant black baby. But that black man and the black woman, they can be blue black, purple black. Black is 150 million midnights. They can be as black as they can be. And no matter how black they are, if the seed runs wild, or what they call scientifically, and since everybody hasn't been scientific, I think I should be. The root of the term science comes from the term seal, which means to know. We can't just get up here and run off at the mouth and give some personal opinion. We're dealing with the lives of the people of the planet Earth. We can't just get up here and talk. This is just me. So what? It's just you. We want science, and science comes from the root, which means to know. We've got to have facts. And before this is over, you will see that this is not the ranting of an angry, hateful, resentful, wild-eyed, bald-headed militant, but you will meet with unmistakable, irrefutable, undeniable, and indisputable facts, proof, and evidence, and then we'll have an opportunity to question it before you go. Now, the black man and black woman, if the seed runs wild in the womb of the black woman or mutates, from that mutation she can even produce an albino, something that is 180 degrees different from both of them. In that black man and black woman, you can find brown, you can find red, you can find yellow, and you can even produce that which is whiter than white. That is why when you go among black people, I know it's been amazing and has really, really puzzled most white folks here in the audience, is to see so many shades of black people. And all of them supposed to be black. Here's one black, black, black. Here's another one medium black. Here's another one light black. Here's another one teas and tan. Here's another one caramel brown. Here's another one that's bright, as they say, damn near white. And another one whiter than that. Here comes another one with blue eyes. Here comes another one with green eyes. Here comes one with brown eyes. You say, wow, these people, they look like everybody. Why do these black people look like everybody? You can go among the black people and you can find the likeness of the Chinese there. You can go among the black people and find the likeness of the Japanese there. You can go among the black people and find the likeness of the European among them. Why is this? Because the black man and the black woman are absolutely the original people of the planet Earth. We are indeed your father and your mother. And you would not be here if it were not for us. It's fitting that this be done on Dr. King's birthday, because we love Dr. King, and we love the work that Dr. King did in sincerity. But Dr. King was wrong, and we must assess his wrongness in its proper light. Another subject for another time. Dr. King would not have agreed to what you're clapping to, and you know I'm telling you the truth. Dr. King held hands with the so-called Jew, or the white Jew. And we want to see if what the rabbi said is indeed true, that the Jew has actually worked with us, marched with us, held hands with Jesse Jackson, held hands with the late Dr. Martin Luther King, held hands with the Urban League man, Vernon Jordan and Roy Wilkins, and how the Jews have supported black causes. we suffer like you. We been persecuted. We understand the black people's plight. I want to hold my point. No, you have a question at the end.
Just a second. What's fair for everybody, when those two gentlemen spoke, everybody was obedient. They listened quietly. They came in to learn. Now, I'm listening to you and I want to learn from you. But I find that we're having rabble-rousers inciting something instead of me trying to learn from you. Like this young gentleman said, we're here to learn. We're not here to cause...
Well, we can't keep the audience from responding
I
to the
agree with
truth.
you. I agree with you, but it is not a fair assimilation.
What do you
This
mean?
gentleman said so. We're here to learn.
Look,
And I'm
sir,
willing to learn from us.
please have a seat and let us proceed. We aren't having any problems. It's moving along smoothly.
I respect you, sir, and I want to learn.
All right. No, ma'am, I'm not going to take any questions until I'm finished. Nobody else took questions. What do you mean I'm not talking on the subject? I'm supposed to speak on the chosen people. That's the topic. Is that the topic? Is that the topic? That is the topic.
Let's have the audience quiet.
You can't have the audience quiet. They love the truth. Respond if you choose. The Jew, the so-called Jew, is not used to losing and never wants it to appear that there is superior knowledge on the scene. Never. Let's go after this. I want to hold that point on the Jews and whether they have really worked behind our causes and the cause for them working behind our causes. I want to hold that. I want to go back to the chosen people, the original people of God. When we look at it, as we said earlier, you can find the likeness of every people on the earth in the black man and in the black woman. But you haven't been in a white meeting and find all kinds of shades of people sitting up in the meeting. Here's a real black one sitting over in the corner, and a Jewish mother and a Jewish father claim that real black nappy head one over in the corner and say that he's a Jew or that he's white from their loins. But you, black man and woman, produce every color in the color spectrum, because that is a sign in you from Almighty God to let you know that you are the father and mother of it all. This being the case, and this being true, we want to go back to the role of Africa in the rise of Judaism. The role of Africa in the rise of Judaism. Abraham was mentioned and Moses was mentioned. Let us take a look at these two great ones and see what we can find on Abraham and Moses. When we look at Abraham and Moses, we find Abraham, sometimes called the original Jew, grew up in Ur, a city in Chaldea, according to Genesis 11:27 through 29, or what is called today, as they will bear me witness, Mesopotamia, which was east of what was called Palestine. The ancient inhabitants were the Sumerians, who, just like the early Canaanites, the Natufians, were noted as being of African ancestry. According to Professor W.J. Perry, the myths, legends, and traditions of the Sumerians include their origin as Ethiopia also. That in fact and in effect, the Cushites, the Sumerians, were one and the same people. The Sumerians established the earliest civilization of that region. They started agricultural practices, including irrigation, built cities, tended cattle, and invented a form of writing, all inherited by the Semitic inhabitants. At the age of 75, according to the Old Testament, Abraham, accompanied by his wife Sarah, and a small band of Herubas, or Hebrews, meaning crossed over, they entered Egypt as the result of a great famine in Canaan, according to Genesis 12, 4 through 10. Possibly to wait until conditions improved at home, but left Egypt soon after. Following Sarah's death, Abraham took on another wife, Keturah, who was definitely an African, according to Genesis 25 and 1. And the children of that union, Zimran, Jokshan, Midian, Ishbah, and Shukah, must have been African in appearance, if his child by Sarah, Isaac also. Also, the Bible relates that Abraham made a child named Ishmael by Hagar, an African maid of Sarah's, who was most likely African too. From what has been mentioned about the history of the Canaan region, it's possible that all of Abraham's descendants were African. Now, many go on to say that Moses was a Jew. Moses very clearly was an Egyptian. And the very Torah that the so-called Jew believes in bears witness that Moses was indeed an Egyptian. Let us turn to Exodus and see if Moses was a Jew or an Egyptian. Second chapter of Exodus, the 19th through the 21st verses. Let's take a look at it. And they came to Ruel, their father, is the 7 daughters of Ruel. This is after Moses, who didn't practice nonviolence. When Moses found the people being persecuted, Moses killed one of the ones who was persecuting the people. And then he had to flee for his life. And there he got refuge in the land where Ruel was, and he had 7 daughters. And the father asked his daughters, how is it that you are come so soon? You come back so quickly today. And they said, an Egyptian. Who? An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, drove the shepherds away, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock. And he said unto his daughters, and where is this Egyptian? Why is it that you have left a man behind? Call him, that he may eat bread with us. And Moses was content to come and eat bread with them and to dwell with the men. And he gave Moses Zipporah, his daughter, in marriage. Now, the Torah itself clearly states that Moses was an Egyptian. I mean, there's not very much argument we can do with that. On tour in Israel, I've been twice. And the guide that took us throughout the area showed us different busts and statues of Moses. And there where they keep the Dead Sea Scrolls, right in that vicinity. And showed him as a very dark, bronze complexioned man. And I asked him specifically, I said, do the people of this land respect Moses as being black? He said, yes, it's common knowledge. They respect him as being black. Then we have another scripture that says Moses was fearful that he could not meet Pharaoh, that he was not eloquent enough. So the scriptures say God told Moses to take his hand and stick it in his bosom. And that Moses took his hand out of his bosom and it turned as white as snow. And then it said God told him to stick his hand back. And he stuck his hand back and it turned back like it was at first, which means it was other than white as snow at first. But let's move that to the side for a second. We want to go back to the origin of this. The Jews, as they are called, the original Jews that were in Egypt, were no doubt a people of African descent and African origin. Now, whence came this Johnny-come-lately Jew? Where did he come from? When did he come in the picture? He is a European who, after the grafting process took place in the Holy Land, was driven. There's the chalk. Ain't got no white chalk. Everything white running nowadays. We got some yellow. We got yellow chalk. He was driven into the caves and hills of Europe. The prefix EU means caves and hillsides. Rope is the rope to bind in. They were confined to the caves and hills of Europe, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us, for approximately 2,000 years. There they went savage in the caves and hills of Europe. They crawled around on their all fours. They ate juniper roots. They ate their meat raw with the blood running out of it. They just knock an animal in the head and jump on him and savagely bite him and eat him right in the caves and hills of Europe, and leave the old animal's decomposing body and the stench from that body coming up in the cave. They would do their number one bathroom duties, number one and number two, right in the cave after leaving the old animal in there that they had finished biting on. They did this for 2,000 years in the caves and hills of Europe. But it was Moses, the great emancipator or civilizer of the white race, that gave them knowledge, that gave them culture, that gave them refinement and civilization. And this people who call themselves Jews today benefited from the teachings of Moses. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us more than any others of the Gentiles or those who did not follow Moses' law. And then they became hated by the rest of the white folks of the world, because everywhere they went in low profile, but they had Moses' teaching and his law and his refinement rooted in them. So they would grow right up in that society, and before you knew it, that Jew had taken over he was influential in the monetary circle. He was influential in the whatever form of media and communication that existed there. He was influential in every major branch where there was to be any influence. The Jew had eased right up in it, the so-called Jew, and supplanted the society. So then whites became angry, the other Gentiles. They became angry with this so-called Jew who had benefited from Moses' teaching. So everywhere he went, he was kicked out. Everywhere he went, he was kicked out. Hitler hated the Jews in Germany because the Jews were so shrewd, so sharp, so wise. And the Germans, the Aryan race, were claiming to be superior to all white folks. But theirs was just a claim. The Jew was controlling. The Jew was influencing. The Jew was manipulating while the Germans had their chest stuck out. But no egotistical majority will allow a minority to rule them for very long. So old Hitler, another devil, rose up and started trying to crush the Jewish influence and power that had grown up right in the midst of his people in Germany. He couldn't do it right away. He moved over a period of time until ultimately it finished or culminated in killing millions of his white brothers who are called Jews today. Now I heard Professor Garber say that no other people, in essence, had suffered more, and that they lost 10 of the 12 tribes in Assyria. Oh, that indeed is ego. You have not suffered like the black man and black woman of America. There is no way on earth you can say you have suffered. What is 6 million? We lost 250 million in the Middle Passage just between Africa and America coming over on the slave trade. Read Sheikh Anta Diop, African origin of civilization. Read Dr. Yusuf bin Yakuna, Black Man of the Nile. Read Dr. Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Read H.G. Wells. Read Sigmund Freud, who tells you that Moses was an Egyptian. Let's go to Freud.
Come on. Go ahead.
First, the noted Egyptologist James Breasted pointed out that Moses' name was not Hebrew as conventionally accepted, but it was an Egyptian word, Musa or Mosa or Mose, meaning child or boy son, to which a prefix of a God's name, no doubt, had been attached and lost over the years. Both Sigmund Freud, in his book Moses and Monotheism, and Howard Fast, and the Jews agree on the Egyptian origins of this name. To begin with, Freud says, And to begin with, James Breasted says, the circumstances of his birth as portrayed by the Old Testament, really betrayed, are pure fantasy. Exodus 11, 1 through 10. Actually, in ancient times, and I want to stop because the rabbi said he didn't believe that it was all scientific. He said it himself. He said he didn't believe it was all factual and scientific, but he believed that it was a compilation, in essence, he said, of the myths and those elements of the culture that held his people together and gave them a sense of belief in their God. I quoted him word for word if I have to go back and pull or lift his exact quote. So he admits that he knows that it wasn't scientific. Let's see how unscientific it really is. It says here, actually in ancient times, African myths about finding a baby in the water, as they say about Moses, were quite common, especially in honoring national heroes. About 2,800 BC, for example, over 1,000 years before Moses even existed, such a myth was created about Sargon of Agade, founder of Babylon. There is a similar myth about the Egyptian god Horus and other famous men such as Cyrus, Romulus, Oedipus, Paris, Telephus, Perseus, Gilgamesh, Amphion, and Zethros. It is likely he was the child of the Pharaoh's own daughter, for he was raised in the royal household. Moses became learned in the wisdom of Egypt and later became a priest of the Egyptian faith, receiving his theological education at Heliopolis. So the important fact about Moses' origins was not his color, however, but his African culture. Moses gives the Hebrews an African religion. After Moses returned to Egypt, he somehow became the spokesman for the Hebrews and introduced them to a monotheistic type of religion, which he had learned as an Egyptian from the teachings of King Tut's brother Akhenaten, and which was previously unknown to them before they came in among our people. The miracles and other Exodus phenomena could also be drawn from old legends in Africa about the sun god. He had a magic rod which could be changed into a snake. You remember that story of the casting of the rods? And could be used to draw water from a rock as well. You remember that story in the Torah. He crossed the Red Sea himself without getting wet. And he divided the waters of the rivers Orontes and Hydaspes by the touch of his rod and crossed that dry-footed too. Now I want to document that. Bible myths and their parallels in other religions, P.W. Dawn, New York Press, Truth Seeker Company. It goes on to say, there are many examples of older African myths or other writings which allude to the same concepts used in the Exodus story, especially in regard to the parting of waters or other barriers to accept a group's escape and the death of its pursuers. But the Jews' account was not worth the Egyptian scribes even noting. It says here that there's no record. I've been to Egypt 4 times. There's no record of this stuff anywhere except in the hearts and minds of the so-called Jews who exist around the world, who are trying to establish a homeland for themselves, which is a question that we definitely don't want to leave out before we go today, the Jewish homeland between them Jews and them Arabs. And I know you would think that we would take the position of the Arab. We don't take the position of either one, because both of you are imposters and neither of you have any business in the area. The real land question hasn't even been raised yet. Come on. I see the audience is thinning out. See, I don't know who chose this topic, but we came not to be disrespectful, but we came to fight with truth, because you have lied to black people too long.
Right.
So I didn't wear any gun or anything. None of the brothers wear any guns. We don't have any weapons. We didn't come to shoot from the hip. We came to shoot from the lip. King David was renowned in Hebrew lore for his psalms. You know about the Psalms of David. I mean, Mother Dear used to, as we say, Mother Dear used to put us to sleep with the Psalms of David. Let's see how smart David really was. But as fast, here we're dealing with, let me get the resource so you can look these up. I don't want to just talk here. Give me just a second. Oh, here we are. The Jews, Story of a People by Fast. F-A-S-T. Some would say fast, but it's Fast. Fast points out here that King David was renowned in Hebrew lore for his songs. Sheikh Anta Diop in African Origin of Civilization, Myth or Reality talks about it also. And we also get glimpses of it in Dr. Yusuf bin Yaqanan, who is professor of Pan-African and African Studies at Cornell in New York. It says, but as is pointed out, even Orthodox scholars admit that when analyzed on historical basis, the great majority of the Psalms that were supposedly written by David, that these Psalms actually come up out of Egyptian and African mythology. Let's examine some of the lines from the hieroglyphics and from the many records that are still in Egypt. You see, it's one thing for the so-called Jew to make claims and then have nothing to prove it. But we can find in the tombs, in the pyramids, in the dead, what do you call it? The Book of the Dead text, the pyramid text. We have the concrete evidence that still exists that white scholars are digging up today. From the walls of the text of Egypt, still there for you to go and examine. Where it says in David's so-called psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. You remember that one, huh? Let's see where he got it from. The Egyptian god Horus was lauded as the leader of the flock and guardian of the fold, because he represented the first who rose again from the dead. We even got a resurrection story here. We even have a virgin birth story in Osiris and who? And his mother Isis. The first virgin birth story. And a resurrection story with Horus. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam got to go back to the black man and black woman. That is why we who follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad do not follow Arabs. When we say Islam, we mean the nature of the black man and black woman at a time when there were no religious labels. Our nature is what we're dealing with. There were not labels until this new people, white people, came on the planet 6,000 years ago. Then prophets started. Then you had to come up with books, because the people that came from the caves and hills of Europe had a concupiscent nature, a reprobate mind, a natural inclination to go against everything that was natural. So you had to have books for them. Bible, Torah, Holy Quran. They had to read all the time. You have to take them through rituals, and they stand up in front of walls and the Arabs bow down. You have to take them something to put them in check, because their inclination was to rule everything at any cost. The Jews have never been a philanthropic, good-hearted, good-willed, fair-dealing people with black people. You helped start the slave trade. I'll hold that point. Don't let me forget it. I'll document it with 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 scholars. My goodness. It goes on to say, the valley of the shadow of death from the Psalms. Ar in Tet, a valley of the dead, in the ritual where those who suffer a second death are buried forever. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. In ritual, reading from the hieroglyphics, I take my rest in divine domain, and the still waters. In Egyptian mythology, they are the waters of Hetep, the waters of rest and peace. Thou preparest a table. From the Egyptian hieroglyphics, a table was prepared upon Mount Hetep and piled with heaps of perishable food. The house of the Lord is designated by speaker in ritual, the mansion where food is produced for me, the mansion lifted up by Shu, the paradise of Am-Kemen, all coming from the hieroglyphics. The paths of righteousness. 2 paths led up to the mansion called the double path. He restoreth my soul. From the hieroglyphics it reads, my soul is with me. Now, it goes on to point out that many of the other Psalms of David, the 104th and others, that Akhenaten, when you study the scripts of the Psalms that Akhenaten wrote, who was of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, that you can copy directly from Akhenaten and put the Psalms of David right next to what Akhenaten wrote hundreds of years before David existed, and it's like it was just plagiarized by our people who came in and read and studied among our people and started a religion in the midst of our people right in Egypt, right in Africa. There are many others. Solomon's Proverbs. It goes on here to compare Solomon's Proverbs with ancient African and Egyptian writings and gives you examples, a whole page of them, of what Solomon said in his Proverbs and what you can find concrete proof of still there in the text of the pyramids and the text of the Book of the Dead and others throughout the Valley of the Kings. I have 10 minutes, but I'm going to have to stop this for a second and go into something else. Why do the Jews always pretend to back black organizations? Why? Because the Jews have used black people as cannon fodder, have pushed us out front on the front line to fight for things that they wanted in America. So they backed Negro organizations, not black organizations. They backed Negro organizations. Negro, when you study the etymology in Greek and Latin, means dead. They backed Negro organizations and Negro leaders. Dr. Martin Luther King, SCLC. I mean, we've got to tell the truth. Let's look at it. NAACP, according to Dr. Ben Yakunin of Ethiopia, who knows quite a bit about Judaism. In fact, his whole family grew up and is a Falasha Jew, but he teaches at Cornell. He says the NAACP and Urban League were owned by Jews in the first place. The NAACP was created by Jews, the Spingarn brothers, Joel and old Arthur, and they ran it until one of them died and the other one retired. Then it was turned over to another Jew, a cousin in Boston, and he later resigned, and then it went into weakly the hands of some blacks. So in answer to your question, any black organizations that Jews have primarily been in, they have and were in the controlling position because they controlled the money in it. All right, I want to cover I've got to really jump here now. No, I can't take my time. Points out here that PUSH, Operation PUSH, SCLC, Urban League, NAACP, Bayard Rustin, Jesse Jackson, all of them, and Dr. King were backed by Jews, and they kept Dr. King out front. Now today, Stevie Wonder is in Washington, D.C., marching for white folks to accept Dr. King's birthday as a national holiday. You're going to the very people who killed Dr. King, begging them to recognize you and give you a holiday. If the white man wanted to give you a holiday, he would give it to you without marching. If he respected Dr. King, and if he respected you, you wouldn't have to spend $1,000 and go and stand in the snow in front of the White House. He would automatically give it. Our image on TV greatly harmed by the Jews. The Jews control and influence NBC, CBS, and the major networks. But they're so sly and subtle, they hide behind the scenes.
That's an insult, and that is bullshit.
Well, the truth will make you act like that. Let's see if it's bullshit, and let's see what kind of insult it actually is. Let me find it. Let's take a look at it. They say you can tell that when you throw a rock in a crowd of dogs, the only one that hollers is the one that get hit.
That's right.
Always been to play down Jewish influence to the degree that the majority of the primetime television programming has been asemitic. To look at three networks, NBC, ABC, and CBS, one would normally think, according to the major male image projected, that the networks are white Anglo-Saxon Protestant to the root, but not the fact. The most known and respected images of the airwaves are Walter Cronkite, Eric Sevareid, David Brinkley, John Chancellor, Harry Reasoner, and Howard K. Smith. Only until very recently has a Jew been able to break into the elite anchor seat, and she is Barbara Walters, known more for her womanhood in a man's occupation and for her $1 million salary than for her Jewishness, Stephen D. Isaacs has pointed out. Able as they are, the Cronkites, Chancellors, and Smiths have served as an emphasis for the historical accident that all three commercial networks grew up under brilliant Jews. The National Broadcasting Company, as part of the General David Sarnoff's Radio Corporation of America, the Columbia Broadcasting Company under Leonard Golderson after it split with NBC's Old Blue Network. Yet it is not enough to document the backroom presidents of the networks. We can also look at the on-camera influence such as Khallid Abdul, Herbert Kaplow, Mike Wallace, Sander Vancourt, Howard Cosell, David Schoenbrunn, and others who carefully hide their Jewishness, which in effect makes their reporting seem more objective and impartial, especially when their subject matter is Jewish-related, Israel, Zionism, or Negroes. The major creator of today's ethnic programming has been Norman Lear. He is responsible for the most hideous and degrading programs and other Jews who back the networks to be aired on a weekly basis. The Jeffersons, Good Times, with the silly character JJ, who has no redeeming value at all. All he can do is holler, dynamite. Let us look at the print media, since somebody screamed that it's a lie. Gary Talese, in his important book, The Kingdom and the Power, pulls the covers off of the New York Times and calls the Times Jewish ownership the Oaks Sutzberger family to issue apologies for their Jewishness. New York Times. After all, to paraphrase Talese, the Times is owned by the Jews, edited by the Catholics, and read by the Protestants. The New York Times is without a doubt one of the most important papers in the Western world and is religiously read by government leaders and policymakers every day. The Times is not a layman's paper or a paper for blacks, but it goes out of its way to be labeled as a Jewish newspaper. But despite its conservative image, it is a critical yet unswerving supporter of Israel, Jewishism, Jewish concerns, and Zionism. It goes on to say that the Washington Post, it goes on to deal with Newsweek, it goes on to deal with Time Magazine, it goes on to deal with the influence of the Jews throughout the media. Not only that, my last point as I gather my stuff, is the unholy alliance that Israel has with South Africa. And from the very beginning, don't tell me anything about your Torah. Don't tell me anything about you following Moses or you following what God has taught you. You helped set up South Africa in its early stages. And if you push me, I'll give you the dates and the times. I have it right here. And I'm not bluffing. Jews in the early stages were in South Africa. And you're there now. I've been all over South Africa. You run the gold. That's why you got all the jewelry stores all over America now. Gold that comes from the gold mines where my brothers and sisters are sweating and being beat every day. You were in Uganda. You even considered Uganda as a national homeland. You considered Argentina as a homeland. And finally you decided on Palestine. If you're going to be promised something by God, you don't have to run all over the world looking for a place. If God gives it to you, God gives it to you, and you don't have to look for it. You can't make any excuses for Jacob wrestling with the man of God. You can't excuse that away. Hell, you don't wrestle with God's man and hold up God's business. Israel is not a good name. His name was Jacob at first. He detains a man of God, beats on the man, fights the man, holds the man up all night long and tells the man, look, I ain't gonna let you go until you give me something. So the man gave him a name, Israel. Now you have to deal with what that name means.
Thank you. Now, we will be having question and answering period. Yes. After the question and answer period, each speaker will have a summary to summarize the whole thing. If you have to leave, please make it quick now. Okay, this gentleman right there. Can you wait? Can you make it?
They can't hear you. Your background is background. What is
Is that a question?
You just want to make a statement.
A statement.
Which point is so you can hear it and you show it on the camera. So if you have a question, come to this point
Right over there.
and ask your question.
Standing over there. So we can get you the
In this I'll let them stand over here.
Okay.
Stand over where?
Where do you want me to stand?
I have a question for Dr. Rush.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Oh, yes, sir.
Are you religious of any nature?
Yes, sir. I'm a Muslim.
You're a what?
I'm a Muslim.
Does Muhammad have any relation to that religion?
Which Muhammad?
I hear you quote him. I don't know.
I quote the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Elijah Muhammad.
Yes, sir.
Is he the one who went up to heaven from the rock of the dome?
I don't believe anybody goes up anywhere from any rocks.
You heard about it, did you?
I've been to the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, but I don't believe men leave rocks and go up in the
I don't
cloud.
believe it either. I want to show you that every religion has myths. And you're quoting...
I just...
Do you have a question, sir?
You're criticizing the Jewish religion because of the myths.
No, sir, I didn't just criticize your religion. I said Islam, too, stole and borrowed from Africa. So there are myths in Islam under Muhammad of 1,400 years ago, myths in Christianity, and myths in Judaism, and they all stem from actual things that we did in Africa. So I didn't leave out the Muslims, I included them.
I was under the impression that you thought only the Jewish...
Oh, no, sir, absolutely not. I made that statement at least 4 times. Thank you for
And
your
your
question.
questions, would you make it really brief and get to the point, please? You have one question. Yes, sir.
I'd like to know what the professor did for Idi Amin.
Yes, sir. May I
Go ahead. Sure.
His question is, what did I do for Idi Amin? I was the guest of His Excellency President Idi Amin Dada on 2 occasions. And as guest of President Idi Amin, I did fact-finding and research throughout Uganda. I found out that the Jews had set up a stronghold in Uganda and was sucking the blood of black indigenous people of the Ugandan area, just like you do in the ghettos and reservations all across America. I found the businesses that you own. I saw the mansions that you own bigger than this building. I saw the places where you lived and manipulated Ugandan people until President Amin became the leader of that government. He took all of the businesses that Jews had in Uganda and turned them over to black people who lived in Uganda. Now, if I came into your so-called homeland, Israel, and brought a bunch of black people with me and took over all of the businesses in your country and misused and abused your people, you would be within your right to run me out of that country. So President Amin ran all Jews out of the country and Asians and said if you were not a citizen of Uganda, you couldn't own any property anywhere in Uganda. I don't know how many he killed, but I'm sure he had to kill somebody. How many has the white man of America killed?
That's
you
right.
killed millions of us.
I'm not a Jew, and I'm not qualified to speak on anything connected with Jews. And I'm not a Muslim. Some of the blacks in here know me. Others may not care. But sir, when you say something to infer that Dr. Martin Luther King was nothing more than a puppet of the Jews or their controller, and I have read of him for years.
Yes, sir.
A friend of mine, the Reverend Thomas Butler, plays Selma, if any of you have seen it, about Martin Luther King and his fight, his cause. I can't sit back and listen to that. Just complacently listen to what...
What's your question?
Well, my question is, what is the purpose? To incite the black, to give them a sense of pride so that they can go out and fight this great cause?
No, sir. The purpose is to tell the truth. That's the plain and simple truth. Dr. Martin Luther King, I did not say his only value was that he was just a puppet for the Jews. I said that I admired him, loved him, and respect him. I sat at my table yesterday, and Allah is my witness, just listening to him and hearing the fight in the man. I sat there and literally booed at my table, just cried, because he's my brother. And he believed in this wicked, decadent society that hates the black man and woman to their core. And they killed Dr. King. He never spoke an evil word against the white man of America. They drug him and his followers in the streets with cattle prods. They turned water hoses loose on them. They murdered them in the street.
No white man supported him?
Many Jews supported him, but the Jews wanted those barriers broken down so they could get in the system. So they needed... Certainly the Catholics were there and the Protestants were there because you too wanted a certain greater stake in this society, and we were your cannon fodder on the streets. That's plain and simple. Dr. King stands for himself. His record and his legend stands for itself. And we love him and we honor him, but we must open up the book and look at his testament. Give him credit where credit is due and allow no one to take anything from him, but we must tell the truth on him where the truth must be told. He was indeed sincere, but he was being used, just as Stevie is being used today in Washington, D.C. Dr. King was so good-hearted and sincere, he was being used.
Yes, ma'am.
I stand before you as a human being, leaving all labels aside, Jew, black, Christian, born again, believer. I leave labels aside. I stand before you as a human being, and I direct my question to the Honorable Doctor, to Rabbi, and to Professor God. How does this serve, this meeting, the cause of peace when the world is crying for peace? There is an old Indian adage, you cannot judge a man till you've walked in his moccasins for 1 mile. Are we all willing to walk in the other person's moccasins that 1 mile? How can black people, after centuries of slavery, therefore understand and appreciate their Caucasian brothers without God's love, the same God we're all referring to, He put in their hearts for them. How can nominal Christians understand the impact of persecutions upon our Jewish people and welcome them, except God's word is shed in their hearts? How can Jewish people forgive their oppressors or even trust the non-Jewish community after Auschwitz without the supernatural love of God in their hearts? The Bible says God is love, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. And there's one more word. Your roots brought from Christianity, I detect that from saying your mother read from the Psalms. And this word is from a very Jewish book. It's a Greek Hadashah written by all Jews. Shaul of Tarsus gave this word. He said, O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust. Avoid profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so called, which some professing have heard concerning the faith. Grace be with you. Amen.
Was that? Did you want to direct the question to me?
I
just want to make it. Statement, you can make it brief, and also you have to make a question, make it brief.
I'll make it brief. Why is it that when our brothers or man here states a fact and we get aroused or we are very enthused about it, why does the white man get up and say that it shouldn't go about? Because of the mere fact that no one got aroused when this man spoke. Everyone got aroused when this man spoke. And everybody wants to get up and walk out. I want to ask you this. Why?
Yes, you may.
I'll tell you something.
The word is this. That's the ugliest, dirtiest concept alive in this world. I can't stand racism. I reject racism. I reject racism when it comes out of the mouth of a white man or when it comes out of the mouth of a black man. To say that anybody is anything because he's white or brown or black is stupid, ugly, and sinful. The most disturbing aspect of this discussion is not that we talked about how people choose, but how they're stuck in racism. I am infuriated today. And I want to tell you, you're asking a question. Why do people leave?
Yeah.
I'll tell you why people left today. They left because they smelled racism. They smelled black people who are setting blacks against whites. And I'm hurt by that. I came here in a spirit of cooperation. I came here in a spirit of love. I came here in a spirit of openness. I wanted to hear. When I was called a so-called Jew, my Jewishness was taken away from me. Dr. Rashidi, please listen to me, because I don't want you to ever do this again. Don't you ever call me a so-called Jew. I'm a real Jew. I know who I am. I'll define who I am. I understand what I am. I'm a real Jew. I choose to be a Jew. I choose to follow God as I understand it. I choose to reject racism. I choose to promote justice. I choose to work with blacks. I still choose to work with blacks because I want to make this world a better place. I reject the notion of blacks standing against whites. I insist that blacks and whites stand together to make this world a place where we can live. I smelled here racism. Racism coming out of the mouths of blacks against Jews. I was called a so-called Jew. I was not accepted in my authenticity. I was not accepted as a real person. I was mocked and mimicked. Vivat this. I don't talk vivat. I don't talk with a Yiddish accent. God damn it, I talk good English.
Are you going to answer his
respect
question?
me. That man said, why did black people walk out here?
Directing it to me.
They
You're
walked out
obviously
here
very
because
upset,
they
Rabbi.
Pardon me?
You're very upset, Rabbi.
You're darn right I'm upset because I came in the spirit of Martin Luther King. I came because I respect people and care about people and dedicate my life to this world better. And I see people here who have not heard the beauty of Martin Luther King, but see Martin Luther King as some kind of a puppet. You know what he was a puppet of? He's a puppet of God. No. He's a puppet of his commitments that he chose freely. He's not a so-called Christian, he's a real Christian. And he's not a so-called black man, he's a real black man. And he's not a so-called human being, he's a real human.
Rabbi, may I ask you a question?
No, I think I've heard quite enough. And I think I'm going to leave.
I don't blame you. I'd like to make this point, not from me, but from the Bible. Revelations 3 and 9 says, "Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, who say they are Jews, and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you." Now that's Revelations 3 and 9, talks of a people that would be called Jews, but are of the synagogue of Satan. Now, the next point is, the Jews talk about Moses. Moses didn't teach integration. Every time Moses went to Pharaoh, what did Moses say? Let my people go. Genesis the 15th chapter, the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th verses, God makes a covenant with Abraham. And he said that his seed would be in bondage for 400 years in a strange land among a strange people. We have been in this country since 1555. 400 and approximately 26 years we have been in this country. So Dr. King was not an instrument totally of God, but yes, he was an instrument of God, because in a laboratory, no experiment is a failure. When the experiment is completed, if it does nothing but let you know and warn you that that's not the way, then God uses it for that divine purpose. But Moses always taught separation. He didn't try to integrate the lakes, the rivers, the brooks and streams and get a drink of water with Pharaoh's people. He didn't try to integrate the toilets with Pharaoh's people. He didn't try to marry Pharaoh's people. Moses said, let my people go into a land of their own. Now every so-called Jew here, you wanted a homeland of your own. We want a homeland of our own. We're tired of our people being shot down in cold blood in this country. We're tired of having to march just to get a man's birthday recognized. So don't tell me nothing about your phony Jewish liberalism. Go to the scripture and deal with it as it is. Moses taught separation. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches separation from the slave and his slave master. From the forces of God must be separated from the forces of the devil. There's no question about it.
I just want to direct my question to where Zeb Garber stressed that that people of the Gentiles were neither inferior or superior to Judaism. How do you to Muslim? Do you consider yourself inferior or superior to Gentiles or anybody else?
I'm sorry, I didn't know you were directing me that.
No, I'm sorry. Where Mr. Garber stressed that he didn't consider anybody of the Gentile race inferior or superior to him, being a Jew. How do you consider that inferior as being a Muslim?
I'm really sorry you asked me that question, because the whole thing of the chosen people, as I heard the rabbi say when he first spoke, is that it is not a thing to be proud and boastful. I've been strong in the manner in which I presented it because we're fighting such strong forces that have been heaped against black people for hundreds of years, and indeed thousands of years. So that is why I was so strong in delivering and presenting such cold, hard, painful facts. But when you're chosen by God, it is nothing to be proud and pompous of, because God chooses you for divine destiny and divine responsibility. And he chooses you, and that puts a great burden on you to begin to clean yourself up, purify yourself, and refine yourself as a divine instrument that will show forth the God's power to the rest of the world. So that is the burden that is on the black man and black woman, who the Bible, just a quick point, has said that he would choose the most despised and rejected people. We are the most despised and rejected by everybody, and we have been made to even hate ourselves. It says he would take those who are last and make them first. And he would take those who are out front and bring them to the end. He would make every valley exalted and bring the mountains down. And it says this throughout the scripture. So your question asking me, do I feel superior to other whites in addition to the white Jews? And my answer to you would have to be one in humility. And that is that we are no more than what God has made us and what God is making us. And if indeed that turns out to show us to be his choice and the ones that are to be divinely exalted with a rendezvous with divine destiny, then we have to accept what God has put on us.
Thank you.
Mr. Garber?
I have a question for you. Okay, you say you guys don't believe in racism. Let me give you an example. We have poor communities.
Wait, calm down. Just calm down. Just wait a minute. Are you addressing your question to me?
Yes,
All right, did I say anything about racism?
but you represent them, and I want to make.
Just wait a minute. Are you making a point to a person who's not here?
I'm making a point to you too.
All right,
Okay.
then you're suggesting that possibly I agree with the statement.
No, I'm not saying you agree with the statement. I don't know if you do or not. But
All right, make your point. Let me see if I can respond to it. I don't know if I can.
Okay, he says that Jews are in, that they're like a togetherness with us. If they have a togetherness with us, why is in all these poor communities you see these pawn shops, they don't open up businesses to educate these black people? You answer my question, since they're together with us. That's what I never could figure out.
All right, dear, let me perhaps put the thing on the other side. I respect the person who followed me on this podium here. We spoke before we even came together, Dr. Rashidin, and I spoke. We kind of understood where we were going to come from. It was his feeling that since he was a guest to the campus that he ought to speak last to get the rhetoric, from the rest of us, etc. I was not at all prepared for some of the remarks that were heard. I know how some white people, because the question was asked, why do they leave? When you speak, Garber, they all seem to be here, they get excited, but the minute this man comes and speaks, all of a sudden they get threatened by it. Those of you who are black, and that's the majority of the audience right now, and let me perhaps take a few moments and I'll get back to your points. You probably are going to find something which is an unusual experience. Most white people don't know how to sit with blacks. And most white people don't know how to go to a black church. And most white people certainly don't know what it is to come in contact with a black Muslim type of rhetoric. Consequently, where the black Muslim rhetoric is extremely important and very proud and very this and very that, for most white people it is extremely threatening. So what's involved here is the threat is there, even though it's not realized, and even though these gentlemen are not going to stomp upon anybody, and all of that, but still it's a first experience. On the other hand, most black people have always been exposed, as this is what I'm hearing right now, to a white rhetoric, and they're exposed to white prejudices, and consequently, when a black man comes and talks out of his own culture, it is threatening, and some leave, and some stay, and those who stay become committed. Become committed as these people here in front of me, and the others standing alongside of me. I don't know how to handle the question about why there are Jewish pawnbrokers in black neighborhoods, and why Jews are landlords, and why Jews are this and Jews are that. I guess the only feeling I have is that I'm saddened by the fact that you assume that all Jews are landlords and all Jews are pawnbrokers, and I'm saddened by the fact, if it's implied, that is, I'm not quite sure, that Jews are the enemies, quote unquote. They are the white man's white man, and they're ripping off all blacks. Some Jews, most Jews, 90% Jews, but never say all Jews. In the same token, dear, I speak from a Jewish community. Blacks have also exploited me. I was raised, I'm not giving you any yichus or background to prove my credentials. I've got scars on me that most of my students are not aware of. I survived the streets of the East Bronx, where probably 95% of the gang called the Prospect Boys are dead now. I survived because of a principle, maybe it's for my parents, maybe for someone else. The black and Puerto Rican members of my gang, if you will, which I was part of, and stomped upon because I was a Jew, in a sense are probably dead right now. They're not really survivors. I can't speak for others. I told you this in the very beginning. You're going to get one man's Judaism. You're going to get one man's feelings. I, unlike the good rabbi, I'm not disturbed by anything heard this afternoon. In the same token, I suspect when the good doctor responded with, right on, brother, this type of stuff, that he was responding from his own cultural backgrounds, and that this Jew up here doesn't compromise and doesn't break. I told you before, and I'll tell everybody here again, and now it's mainly a black audience.
You didn't understand
Honey, I'm not finished yet. Let me just finish my statement. I do not bend. If I disturb some of you, I think that's your problem. Just as if this gentleman here disturbs most people here, it is their problem, not his problem. Now, in regard to the Jew in the black neighborhoods, I'm sorry for them. I don't apologize for them. It is an individual situation. In the same token, when a guy puts a gun to my head, I'm not quite sure if when I look at a bandit or a thief or a burglar or somebody's going to kill me, whether he's singling me out because I'm white, and let's assume he's black. You've got black thieves, you've got white thieves, you've got black rapists, you've got white rapists. This gentleman talks about how the whites rip off the blacks, and I suspect that we had another extended hour. He'll talk to you about how blacks rip off blacks. And within your own community, you have your worst people. The analogy, if you will, is to the Jew, who in a sense is the self-hating Jew who can't come to grips with his Jewish skin.
You brought that about. The Jews brought
Just wait a minute. Again, you're using that plurality of the word Jews. Okay, I don't agree with you. Just as I don't say blacks cause my problem, I don't like to hear that Jews cause your problem. Most Jews, whatever it is, never use the absolutes, at least in my opinion. Let me get back to something else. You scratch my skin, you destroy me, and you probably would find the next destruction to be a black. In the same token, you destroy the black person, you probably would find destruction of the Jew. I find it one of the ironies of all of this, that of all the peoples that have possibly analogies and parallels in their history, that you find a situation where Jews can be anti-black, and you also find the possibility where blacks can be anti-Semitic. Blacks and Jews better get something very clearly stated, after they get their own trip together, obviously, that they probably would find that in the history of mankind and history of survival, that there are two peoples, one a religious, ethnic, cultural people, another, if you will, a racial people as well, such as the blacks, that together they're going to survive. And definitely they'll be defeating each other if they work against each other. I can understand where he's coming from because it's important. I just want you to respect where I'm coming from. And maybe, just maybe, when you walk out of this room, not all Jews are, quote unquote, what you might imply them to be. That's all I have to say. I can't speak for the other man.
Okay, they keep saying that they have this togetherness with us, but I haven't seen 1 ounce of it yet. All the years I've been existing. You can point out.
Okay, now I understand what you're getting. All right, some Jews have this ability to speak this way. Other Jews would not. In the same token, I suspect the Jew who speaks this way can probably be asked by another Jew, follow me now, well, these blacks, what is it in there for us? I mean, do they really cooperate with us? Do they really help us when our synagogues get swastikas, when our synagogues have anti-Semitic language on it and stuff like that? You have to understand that people are people. And the bottom line of all this is that you've got limbs and I've got limbs. Your capillaries and your blood is my capillaries and my bloods. Do you understand? All right, just 1 minute now. Some of you might have a different position. But I suspect if you open me up and I bleed, I'll bleed to death. And I suspect if I open you up, you'll bleed to death as well. And I suspect if I need a transfusion of bloods, I don't know from where some of you might be coming, but if you got my blood type, I would like to have it because I want to survive. The differences between us are extremely important. There also is a basic similarity. We are all human beings. At least that's the way I like to look at the culture of man. And the same token, it doesn't mean I want to be a WASP. The same token, it doesn't mean that I'm going to ascribe to 3/4 of the definition said about the Jews presented by the last speaker. I'm not so-called. I'm not hyphenated. I'm not going to be completing the Christianity. I am Jewish. And in my very experiences, I feel that. What really is the difference between all of us, if you really want to get down to it, if we have the extra hour, I'll do that, is that we have memories that are different. Same historical facts, but the responses to those historical facts are memories. My memories are a little different than the white Gentile world. They also are a little different than some of the positional memories of the black Muslims. And don't you forget this as well. In the Jewish peoplehoods, Jews are of all colors. There are black Jews. They go back centuries. There are all types of Jews. If Judaism is really the stereotypical so-called, etc., I suspect the Falasha Jew might be among us, if there is any, of which there possibly is one sitting in the back. he probably would feel insulted that his type of identification with white Jews is because he's been ripped off of his culture and his heritage. This is the bottom line.
Okay, we have time for 3 more questions. Mike, this lady and this lady. We have time for 2 more.
I thought we had more time. As a person, I love everybody in this room. And I don't care when someone says to me, puts words in my mouth, and you're talking facts now. You're saying that I hate you, and you haven't even asked. Because I love you all. And I am white. And my nanny was black. And ever since I'm telling you the truth now, my brothers are black. I don't mean my blood brothers, but I grew up and my family was black. I eat grapes every morning. So, I don't know whether that makes me any different than any other white person you ever know. But I love you. And I don't think that it's fair for you to say to me that I don't. Okay? And maybe I'm a little irrational and maybe I'm a little emotional, but I have a right to be when somebody has told a lie in my name.
Yes. The scripture says in the book of Exodus that the people would be judged all the way to the 3rd and the 4th generation. And certainly that must go beyond. I understand your pain. I understand your pain to the degree of knowing that a new generation of whites is coming up. You now hate the racism. You hate the slavery, the misuse and abuse and mistreatment of people, black people and other people around the world that your fathers and ancestors before you have perpetrated against the world. But the scripture says that that would be prophecy, that your heart would be softened that way so that you would be one of the instruments that God would use to bring this society down. So the book says Satan would begin to cast out Satan. And how then could his kingdom stand? And I understand your pain, because here you have come to a table and you didn't do any of those things. You have come to a table that is already set and prepared, that your parents or your parents' parents all the way down the line in history set, and death is sitting at the head of the table. So whatsoever one soweth, that shall he also reap. The seeds were sown of murder, hatred, colonialization, slavery, and bloodshed yesterday. But the harvest time is today. And you just happen to be born in the time of the harvest. And you must reap the harvest of your fathers, because the nature of your people is still in you. And no matter how long your hair is and how soft your voice is, you still have the potential that they had. But your job today and your divine mission will be to rise up against those of your own race who came before you. God intends to use your tender-heartedness and your anger against your own parents to help bring their world down.
Brilliant.
I'm sorry, I said a few minutes ago that was the last question. If you have, I'm sorry.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir.
Why, they have to give up the hall? They still got a couple.
I didn't choose the last question. Yeah, I'm saying that.
Continuing.
Well, they're the only questions left. If you're not in the aisleway, then you can't ask a question. If you're not there, and you can't ask a question.
Before the questions are asked, this is not trying to throw a damper or anything, but it's the understanding by me, at least my ability to participate, is until the 2 o'clock hour. There are other commitments, but everybody, I understand, is welcome to stay as long as they want.
So this will be the last question, and the speakers will have a summary.
You've got 2 people in the aisle. You can't ignore the other.
It's 3.
3 questions. Quickly ask your question.
Yes, sir. Mr. Garber, my question to you is that I heard the rabbis say that Abraham was his father, the pioneer of the Jewish Jewish religion. I want to know it, and when minister came before us, said that the Jews today are the so-called Jew, not of the original Jew. And you said that you are not a so-called Jew. How can you prove that you are the original Jew?
All right, your question really beckons an academic response. Part of this hour, as far as I'm concerned, is not academic. Part of the hour is emotional, it's feelings, it's the chemistry, the nature that makes up a person. If you want an academic response, people, then we have to play with an academic by game or an academic, type of bylaws, which I'm prepared to do because I know Semitics, I also know the Hebrew Bible, and I know how to deal with etymologies. I don't feel that that is the purpose of this whole hour the way it is developed. When a person is told so-called, don't you understand what comes across? It's just like the white person who leaves from an audience like this. It's just like if I say, woman, you're black, but I use the term Negro and begin to walk around and say she and stuff like that. It's an insult. You become immediately defensive. That's why the good rabbi responded the way he did. I understand where the speaker is coming from. He's trying to make a point. The problem is most of you out there are untrained, if you will, in rhetorics. I can also make points like that. I can also stomp my hands and do my little jiggerbug, etc. And if I ever did something like that, it is not meant to be insulting. It's meant to make a point. Hence, immediately when a person is threatened this way, so-called, immediately he becomes very defensive. I am stating what I understand to be my self-value. I am not so-called, I'm not inferior, I'm not superior, I happen to be a Jew. If my line goes all the way back to Abraham, probably not. Just like your lines probably don't go all the way back to the original primitives or the original civilization in Africa and stuff of this nature. I don't give a damn about origins. I want to know what your belief system does to make you a better person. If your belief system makes you a better person by the teachings that you're able to follow, so be it. But in the same breath, understand me and understand me well. My belief system, my people, my culture makes me the person I am today. I don't walk out of here feeling that I've slaughtered a Goliath or David has slaughtered me. I walk out of here that I at least have been non-apologetic, and I would also like to say, likewise, non-polemical. I don't have to score points by citing, as it were, the ideal Muslim or the ideal black or the ideal Christian and then chop him down to score my points. That was my whole point before. And if it somehow is negative to most of you, and if it's not a popularity contest and I'm winning here and I'm not getting brownie points, so be it. I've got to be true to my own skin. I've got to be true to my own skin. And to be true to my own skin is not to knock down another culture, another people. In the same token, I know when another person comes to his own skin, this is how he does it. Fine. People walk out of rhetorics. I'll tell you why. Because they're not sure of where the hell they are. I'm not threatened by anybody's anti-Semitism, whether it is physical, cultural, or spiritual. You want to know why? Because I have worthwhileness in being who I am. I have worthwhileness in knowing that a tradition called the Jews has made me the better person that I am today. For others, it's another culture. For me, it is this. You can't question it. It is a statement of myself. And that's where it stands.
Okay, we got another question. I'm sorry, that was the last question.
May I address
Oh, yes.
my people, my personal people,
Yes,
back around 3 generations, come out of what is today Israel.
Yes, ma'am.
When we go back, all the way back in history, I don't give a damn what their color was. Because we all started somewhere from one color, graduated to other colors, and it doesn't make any difference. What does make a difference, and why I walked out before, is because at this time in life, by your people, my people, Christian people, and all people,
We have only one mission, not to breed hatred, but to find out how the hell we're going to get along together. And we are not going to get along together listening to you or anyone else breed hatred. I don't know who the person is that opened up a shop in the black neighborhood. They could have been the most godly person out. They could have been the other kind. Does it make a difference? Do they have to have a label? Why aren't we getting together with the fact of saying we are people and let's start working as people?
I appreciate your question. And it's a good question or a statement. Perhaps the answer may be a little better. Black people are not racist. We have never been. I listened to you all the way out. I gave you respect. We have never been racist. White people are outright wickedly racist.
Right.
Black people have never robbed you of your name. Black people did not take your religion, your culture, your God, your folkways, your mores, and your norms from you, bring you from a distant land and put you in slavery 400 years in another country. Black people never did that to you. But when you, with your foot on the black man and black woman's neck, find them now crying out and pointing out how you got your foot on their neck and asking you to get your foot off of their neck, now you call us racist. We are only giving you the history of what you have done and what you are still doing to us, and whether you are directly doing it or not. If America is a country of majority rule, why hasn't this overwhelming white majority stepped forward to get these white folks' foot off our neck?
For yourself.
Peace!
That's right.
Let's do it now.
That's right.
We're gonna do it now.
That is right.
You do it the way we did it. The hard way with education.
Wait.
We had it the hard way. We went to school.
But you stole and cheated. We can't do that.
We didn't steal and we didn't cheat. You went out there and came over from Europe. They came over with nothing. And what do you think they got? They had to do it the hard way. When I went to school, I was told I was no good. The Massachusetts
By other white folks.
When I
We
went
never
out
told
to
you
get
you
a
were no
job,
good because we thought you were God.
I couldn't get a job that I couldn't get because you were black. When I went to try to get a job, I couldn't get a job, but you could, you were black. So don't tell me we didn't have it. We went back to school because that's the only way we can learn and get there.
Okay, we got another question. Brother.
You can all go to school. Violence from one to get violence.
We're not talking about violence, ma'am.
Okay.
Just,
All right, Muriel.
let me make this point. We're not talking about violence. We're talking about, as I heard the professor here say, and I think maybe the rabbi said, we're talking about self-defense. Black people have never been violent. You've drug us in the streets. You've turned water hoses inside. You shoot us down like dogs. And with Dr. King, with his good heart, Dr. King and others would just hold hands and sing. Wouldn't even fight back while you drug them in the streets. But we're talking about self-defense. We're saying that if we can bleed, you can bleed too. I wasn't gonna come to this meeting today. I'm glad I did. You know, because I'm glad I got my turn here. Because I'm so tired of all these people talking about what they ain't did and what they have done and all this. You know what I mean? I ain't did nothing to nobody. When none of the black people who were drugged and castrated and treated like dogs throughout our lives did nothing either. That's right. To nobody. That's right. Do you hear where I'm coming from? That's right. I'm just getting started. See, this BSU here
This BSU that's sitting right here, this BSU stands for Black Students Union.
That's right.
Well, in 1969, see, I'm from Meridian, Mississippi.
Come on.
I'm lost. I know where this man is coming from.
Yes, sir.
See, because he brings chills to me.
Yes,
see,
sir.
and he brings tears to my eyes because I know that he's right.
That's right.
And no matter how any Jew or any white boy or anybody else feels, he is wrong. Right. I don't care what nobody says. God Almighty says it's wrong. See, I marched with Dr. King. The BSU I started in 1969.
Go ahead.
See, when my house was bombed, when my little sister was killed, I know for myself. Everybody's talking about their scars all over their body and all this. I want you to know right now, check half the black bodies walking around. All the police that we have to face are white.
That's right.
We don't, because of the white man, he hired them. We didn't. I don't want to hear it. I mean, can I come down here? Can I come down here? I don't even want to hear it. I don't even want to hear it. I have been waiting for this. I don't want to hear it. To me, it's just what this reverend said it was. It is rhetoric. It is bullshit. It's what it is. See, because my body is scarred by the Klan. My body is scarred by Jews, not by no black man. See, the stealing that we do, the taking that we do, the robbery that we do is caused because we didn't have enough. And I want you to know that as white people, no matter what you think you are, because I'm telling you right here, Jew don't mean nothing to me, black don't, as long as we treat each other right. You see where I'm coming from? I don't want to hear it no more, see, because when I saw my little sister get blown 40 feet in the air, I knew right then that somebody out there was wrong. And I've been waiting for this opportunity to tell you.
Come on, bro.
I'm telling you tonight, everybody was mad and said Dr. King was crazy for hollering, free at last, free at last. And didn't no black man pull his trigger. Get back, brother. I want to talk right now. No, I don't want to hear it. See, they blew him away, and I didn't see a black man pull the trigger. That's right. I didn't see him pull the trigger. You know what, brothers and sisters?
Yes, sir.
Everybody, I want you to know, because what's done in the light, it's done in the dark, will come to the light.
That's right.
And it is now beginning to change. Because we, as the black man, are the dominant one. See, this is from this loin here. I can take anybody, and this is the truth. Because the white man says that 10% black blood is black. See, so if that means that if it only takes 10% and there's 90% of his there, then we are the dominant one. See, and this is what the white man fears. This is what he fears. This is what's got him afraid of the black man today. See, you're talking about the dominant one? We are. It is proven. See, to this day, and the Jews have been going through it since the beginning of time, and they're still not totally free. We went through it 400 years and have the advantages of this man. We came here and changed.
That's right.
But we got him to take him off of us. And he let him know that he was wrong. Now I'm telling y'all today, see, because the 3 civil rights workers killed in Mississippi, in Meridian, Mississippi, my mama put the last meal in their bellies. Hey, because your Klan was riding through our neighborhoods talking about we killed the niggas' dad. See, we, not the black man, not the Mexican, but we, the white man. Come on. And the Jew talking about, well, we're not a part of that. Every time I turn around, you're hollering you're white. Your damn hair is kinky as mine. Look at yourself. Look at him. And he's sitting up here telling me, I'm proud to be a Jew. When you drop that shit and say I'm proud to be a human being, then it's time. and not until. Now, God Almighty knows I'm telling you the truth today. I want to tell you.
Close it out.
Okay, thank you for coming, everybody. And there's a tape cassette of this if you wanted it from. I don't know who you talk to one of these.
You want to buy the cassette tape? You talk to Brother Mr. X here. You get a tape on the whole program and change the play it on. Talk to Brother Mr. X. You want to get audio tape. $1.
Tell them about it. Just tell them over here.
The only black newspaper in the United States, the final call, $1.
Let's go.
God Almighty bless you. The scriptures say when God is for you, who can get out against you? I know. Put it in the scripture, brother. That's the only hope we got. If God is not with us, we can't beat this devil. I know. There's no way else. We're fighting ultimately. That's right. That shows you right there because of the totally light skin and the totally dark skin. It's a total contrast. We have to fight and we got to win. Sir? I'm glad you can make it.
What's going on? I think it's good. I would like to ask you, do you think the Jews came unprepared, the rabbi and the rabbi came unprepared for this rabbi?
Well, no, sir. I don't think it's possible for the rabbi and the professor to come unprepared because the question was on Jewish subject matter. And the professor said Garber is the head of the Department of Jewish Studies. How is he going to be unprepared when he spent years of his life preparing and got his doctorate degree in that field? He's a scholar in that field. Now, the rabbi is an accomplished scholar and spiritual teacher in the Jewish faith. How could he be unprepared?
Okay, but he spoke mostly on his.
We talked before. He told you we talked. We talked here and we talked on the phone. And as he got up and said, we agreed on what we were going to do. He said that himself.
Do you think the debate was getting kind of warm and a lot of
anytime you deal with truth, it's not only going to get warm, it's going to get hot.
And,
because the guilty does not like to have the cover pulled off. They don't like it.
Would you be willing to debate with somebody else in another culture or in another as they were representing Christianity or Protestants or the God?
I don't want to debate any black people.
No black people, but I noticed you may.
And I don't want to debate anybody else. I'll come back and speak or lecture.
But
I
no
don't
debate.
Want to debate because I don't like the way it went. The truth has to be told to wake our people up and to open their eyes and to raise them from the graves of mental and spiritual ignorance. But I don't like the after feeling of that kind of experience. So I would rather come and speak or lecture sometime. I don't want to debate.
Okay, let's get on you for a second. I heard you speak before. Glad that you're very good speaker. You're very emotional speaker.
Yes, it means I feel what I say.
How do you?
You saw some of the rabbis cuss, goddamn. You ever hear the rabbi calling goddamn? Boy,
that ain't kosher at all.
When do you start?
That's not kosher.
When did you become?
When did I? About 13 years ago.
13 years ago. And you have all that knowledge for 13 years to become what? Are you a head speaker of a temple or background?
I'm just a little minister here in the area.
Okay, thank you very much for being nice seeing you again.
Let's get all the Muslims, everybody. Well, let's wait till the brother pack up his nobody. Hurry with your equipment so we can get out of here. We gonna wait. Elijah Muhammad said when you drop a bomb, don't wait around for the fallout. Look, when you whoop the Jew, you better know what you're doing because them people, that's what they hated Amin for. That's why they spend all of their time killing Amin on radio, killing him on TV, killing him in newspapers. Because Amin embarrassed them before the world. They don't forget it. But they're not used to losing. They never lose until they come in contact with us. I'm going to break them. He said they racism in here. I didn't get a chance. There were too many things. I enjoy it. The black people love it. You got to recruit the minister. You got to captain. He's a warrior. He's a warrior. Minister Archie, you don't know what he's going to have spiritual captains now. He's a leader. I know that.
Should come up. The beginning. Should come out in the beginning. Come on, Jewish women.
Yeah.
Let's start powering.
Literally.
You couldn't go first.
Don't you ever tell me that I'm a so-called Jew.
Cheers in the
I thought he was going to jump over there.
Anyway.
You know why the other cat left? What's his name? Steinstein or whatever?
We know you've got chosen
Thank you for your support. Oh,
the way she was into it. This is a jealousy. This is serious. But Neil was giving me a hand.
Y'all got the brothers marching Saturday night. Saturday night. So we going. You said you were going to be down. You said Brother Ray. I will drop it off. I'm gonna drop it off. So after the team, they let me.